Councilors, if we can find our seats, please. We're going to start our meeting momentarily. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Barnstable Town Council meeting at September 21st, 2023. At this time, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make your presence known. Not seeing any. Roll call, please.
Councilors: Atzlis, Clark,
Here.
Cullum,
Here.
Cusack,
Present.
Rapcorsetti,
Present.
Levesque,
Here.
Ludke,
Here.
Mendez,
Here.
Neary,
Here.
Schnepp,
Here.
Shaughnessy,
Here.
Starr,
Here.
Steinhilber.
Here.
You have 12. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could all please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and also please remain standing for the moment of silence. Just like to remember Mrs. Linda Moran, who passed away this past week, our faithful town council assistant, Cindy Lovell's mom, longtime resident of Barnstable, and much loved for many different reasons. So just want to remember and keep in our thoughts and prayers the Lovell family. Thank you. It is now time for public comment. If anybody would like to speak during public comment in the hearing room, if you could come please to the podium, sign in and recite, just let us know your name and what village you might be from, and you would have 3 minutes, please.
I'm always last. I get to be first tonight. This is great. Good evening, everybody. My name's Chuck Tuttle.
Is the microphone on? Very good. Just making sure.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chuck Tuttle. I live in Centerville and have for a long time. We are all advocates of clean energy. I know I am not alone when I say that it is beyond me why the management of the town of Barnstable, including the town council, has begun to allow the industrialization of our villages in order to satisfy state and national quotas for clean energy. I applaud the town, including the town councilors, for your interest in clean energy. We all need to do our part. However, the wind power projects proposed to come ashore at Craigville Beach and Covell's Beach and Dowses Beach would service expensive energy for much of which there are no buyers, at great risk to our residents and natural environment. Avangrid has announced that they have nobody lined up to buy the energy they propose to produce. Indeed, they agreed to pay millions of dollars in order to get out of their original power purchase agreement contract. They were in court with the Edgartown Conservation Commission because of their lack of transparency. Evidently, the Edgartown Conservation Commission's denial of their permit request was superseded and overturned by a state-based licensing authority. Avangrid cannot control the negative effects of their project on our environment. There is no bond in place in order to cover remediation of any damage to the environment and wetlands. They say they have insurance. Insurance is not a bond. Avangrid is not a social service. They are here for profit. Avangrid is not here to help us. They are here to help themselves. Their plan calls for a 4-acre electrical substation to tie into the grid at the top of Chute Flying Hill in a wellhead protection area upstream from Aquacket Lake. They propose to store thousands of gallons of carcinogenic flame retardant at that location. This is an extraordinary and unacceptable risk to our single-source aquifer. When the contractor is asked about pipe seams opening up below the Centerville River, other failures or spills of their carcinogenic materials in a wellhead protection area, they say, quote, "We don't anticipate any problems." Really? Do you consider that to be a good answer? They don't anticipate any problems. It's remarkable to me that this project has gotten this far. If all the Avangrid projects are allowed to proceed, 2.8 billion watts of electricity will be pulsing through the streets of Barnstable every hour, every day, forever. Your electric bills will go up, your property values will go down, your health is bound to be compromised. This is the first project of its kind in the United States. This has never been done before, not even in Europe. Are we really going to allow an industrial contractor to make the town of Barnstable a sacrificial guinea pig?
I'm sorry,
There
could you
is a
finish up,
better way.
please?
I know it's 3 minutes. Give me 30 seconds, please. There is a better way to bring electricity generated by wind power to the electrical grid on land. It's called the planned approach, which is an electrical superhighway that delivers energy from these windmill farms to the power grid without having millions, in fact, billions of watts of electricity pulsing below residential neighborhoods. Fortunately, there's a mechanism in the town which the citizens can employ in order to mandate a public hearing on issues about which they are very concerned. This morning, a petition was filed with the town clerk, complete with hundreds of signatures from Barnstable taxpayers. We look forward to the public meeting so that we can have an open, honest, candid, truthful conversation about what the heck Avangrid is trying to do to our villages and town. Hopefully, the public meeting will help us
We're at 4
develop a way
minutes.
out of this mess and put yourselves, your children, your people, your environment, your town ahead of the profits of the industrial contractor Avangrid. Thanks for letting me run over. I appreciate your attention.
Thanks, Mr. Tuttle. Would anybody else like to speak? Yes, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sandy Jones. I am a 24 resident of Centerville. I, this morning, passed in a petition with over 500 signatures asking for the town of Barnstable to host an open meeting regarding Park City Wind and regarding Commonwealth Wind. We started collecting signatures 9 days ago. Within 8 days, we had over 500 signatures. I have been door knocking personally myself since June after the May Cape Cod Commission hearing allowing Avangrid to continue with their permitting. While I was door knocking, I was just speaking with the residents, telling them about the project. I followed the route. I went from Chute Flying Hill Road to Oak Street, down through Craigville Beach Road, and many of the residents are not aware of this project. I, for one, I live on Park Avenue. I did not even know about the project until April. That's when I got involved. I feel like there's a breakdown of communication somehow between the town of Barnstable and its residents, and that was evident when I spoke to the residents. Many of them were for this petition. Ones that were for the Park City Wind project were against Main Street, Centerville. It's historic. There's a comprehensive study that the town of Barnstable had put together, and in that, in 2015, it said any improvements to Main Street should really involve the Barnstable Historical Commission as well as the Centerville Civic Association, and both of their recommendations was to use an alternative route. But the reason why I'm here is because all of you, this is an election year. I read a post that this meeting was asked to be expedited from a counselor to the president. It was on Facebook Sunday night, and I ask you to let the process work, to have the vote certified, host an open meeting, give us adequate time to bring the residents together. There are people that live alone that will need transportation. Give us enough time so everybody's voice is heard. Centerville has taken a hit these last 4 years. People are upset about the wind project, Main Street, Centerville. The bog is a big hot topic. 310 Main Street regarding Mother's Park. The residents were notified a couple days prior, and there were plans already drawn up for this particular project. So people feel disconnected. They feel like they're not heard. And the one thing I will say that really struck a chord with me after watching the conservation meeting the day after Labor Day is Charlie McLaughlin said, there is inadequate communication between the town and Avangrid, and that's exactly how the residents in Centerville and Barnstable are feeling. They don't know what's going on. I feel like when they're not involved, people tend to believe the worst. They think there's a lack of transparency, and they're discouraged. And I'm sure all of you, it's an election year, you're hearing it from the residents themselves. So all I ask is, with this petition, please let it play out, let it be certified, let us have a meeting, maybe 30 days or whatever you choose, but let us bring everybody together so they can voice their concerns. We can't stop the project, but possibly we can discuss with the town a better way, solutions to communicate with all of its residents and bring them into the fold. We have a great group of residents in this area, intelligent residents. People are old timers that have been here 3-4 generations, and they just feel like they don't matter right now. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Ms. Jones.
Good evening. Felicia Penn from Hyannis. As I'm sure you're all aware, it's football season. And if I was a ref being present at the 2 recent hearings of the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Committee, after hearing or reading the public comments and seeing the developers' presentations, I would blow the whistle and take a big time out. Why? First, the project before the committee is putting the cart before the horse. If I was a sitting member of this volunteer group, I would call a timeout because the unified design guidelines and regulations that were supposed to go hand in hand with the new zoning for downtown Hyannis are still in draft form. If I were a member, I would ask myself, why would the committee use criteria that was created for different purpose and apply them to this project? I would be thinking, isn't it better for everyone if the new criteria and guidelines were in place, since whatever projects are in the pipeline are now going to be with us for the next 50, 100 years? And it's important we get it right. Second, the new zoning was basically sold to the public as featuring commercial on the first floor, commercial uses on the first floor, with residential above. So there could be shared parking on each parcel. The very first project to come before the committee has no commercial use at all. It's only residential. And this is not representative of how Main Street functions. Main Street is the commercial heart of downtown Hyannis. For the very first project to come before the town to not feature a commercial use in this space is a giant, giant mistake. Economically, it's not advantageous to Main Street in the future. It's just not what anybody would plan for this corner on Main Street. It needs commercial, it needs public uses on the first floor that are accessible to the public. Third, the zoning as it exists today does not allow for enough parking. We all know this. 1 car per a 2-bedroom unit isn't going to do it. So where will the extra cars park? That's a question people have been asking for centuries here, and nobody ever has an answer. So just like a knitter who buys a pattern and the yarn for a project, and you get halfway through and can now see what it'll look like, and you know it isn't the right shape or proportion, the colors aren't right, what do? You rip it out and you start all over again. So it's become apparent that the new zoning needs some fixing. The ref is calling for a timeout, so we take our time and do it right. It's the right thing to do for the residents, for the developer, and even for our visitors. Please take a timeout and do it right. It doesn't mean nothing will happen. Just do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Penn.
Hi, Asia Graves. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Now? All right. Hi, Asia Graves. I know you guys have seen me a lot. I'm here about some of the comments I've heard, as well as housing. So many people in the audience are here because they support the environment. I support the environment, but the real situation is we have people that are sleeping right outside right now on the Village Green lawn that we have because there's not enough housing. We don't need, I'm speaking, please. Anyways, like I was saying, there are too many people right now that are fighting to keep a roof over their head. You have nurses, doctors, teachers, millennials. My generation makes up 30% of our population here. So yes, we may not be at every single meeting, but we do vote. And many of us may not come out in these off-year elections, but I do want to say that we do come out and we will vote. There has to be something that's done when it comes to the average millennial in my generation cannot buy a home on the Cape. Many people on Nextdoor are saying, well, if you can't afford to live here, move. Guess what? In order to move, you have to have money to be able to move, resources. Saying that we're going to stop building right now, and discuss, oh, the trim is not perfect. Oh, we don't have enough windows. Guess what? The average person who is in an emergency shelter because Massachusetts has a right to shelter law, they're sleeping in places like the Yarmouth Resort. Guess what? They're not worried about the trim of a building. The building that's going to be considered at 201 Main from wind development is at the least busy end of Main Street. Guess what? We don't need to have, that area is actually zoned to, it doesn't have to have businesses on the first floor. We have enough businesses that need support year-round on Main Street. I spoke with several owners on Main Street that are open year-round, and they don't have enough business. Most of these restaurants on Main Street close. If we had residents living on Main Street, people like myself and others could actually walk over to the local shops. Instead of going to Target and places like that, they would actually shop local on Main Street. I'm tired of people that have they're here that basically don't understand and have never or have not had to find housing in the past few years. Some people may have gotten their home for under $50,000 years ago when housing prices have went up. So all I'm here to say is we need the housing desperately. We need bulldozers in the ground tomorrow morning because as long as we have a homelessness crisis in this country, we are not the best country in the world. So please, we can do this. We can allow seniors to rent out rooms in their house, maybe give them discounts on property taxes, because I did speak with seniors knocking on doors who said their property taxes are too high. Maybe if they rent out a bedroom to someone who needs one, maybe they can get help with that.
Ms.
Maybe
Graves,
there's
if you can
things
wrap it
we
up,
can
please.
do.
You're past three.
I'm good, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Graves. Is there anybody else in the hearing room that would like to speak during public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Is there anybody who would like to participate remotely?
Yes, we have Joanne O'Connor. Joanne, you may unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Joanne O'Connor. I'm from 555 Main Street in Centerville. Good evening. While some members of the council and town management may feel there have already been lots of meetings and opportunities for Barnstable voters to ask questions and get answers, the reality is that is not the case. The fact that over 500 voter signatures were gathered for this petition within 8 days should make it apparent to the council that citizens do not believe the town and or the project's developer, Avangrid, have adequately listened to and or pointedly addressed their specific issues and concerns. The town has left the process of public forums and meetings on these projects up to Avangrid. Consequently, the public has been subjected to monthly, one-sided, best-case scenario presentations by Avangrid and its consultants. We will note that other than 2 or 3 councilors who have occasionally attended a few of these presentations, we've never seen other members of the town council in attendance. That being the case, how can a majority of the council even know what questions citizens are asking and whether they are getting adequate, responsive answers from Avangrid? In any case, it is the job of our town government to listen to the public in a setting where we can all benefit from hearing each other's questions and concerns and to give pointed answers. This petition asks you to do that job. When the public is asked questions or expressed concerns about safety or environmental issues, the response is often that, well, we'll have to get back to you. And then either no one gets back or they have to ask the same questions meeting after meeting in hopes of getting an answer. In other settings, town officials have spoken at length without actually answering the questions citizens have asked. Often the Avangrid representatives simply say, we don't anticipate a problem. Not anticipating a problem is not an acceptable answer, and it doesn't give citizens any comfort that their concerns and interests are being adequately listened to and addressed. The signers of this petition request an open meeting of Barnstable voters be held at the Barnstable High School Performing Arts Center or comparable size venue within a reasonable and mutually agreed upon time frame so that adequate notice and advertisement of the meeting can be made. In order to facilitate as many voters as possible who wish to participate, we request the meeting be held in hybrid format, both in person and Zoom or similar technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corner. Anybody else via remote?
There's no one else for this item.
Okay, thank you. And just a response, this is time for a response to public comment. We are obviously in receipt of your petition and respect the fact. And I was speaking to Ann Quirk about it when you actually pulled and got the information from her. And even then, I had spoken to her and said we had been looking to get an update from Avangrid, and I had been speaking to Ken Kimmel and Pat Johnson about getting an update in October. So, and I've had conversations with Town Manager Mark Ells in regards to that, and his conversations that he's having in regards. And again, we're not really talking. We're not talking about Commonwealth Wind. And I'm sorry, Ms. Jones, if I'm looking at you. Obviously, if there's anybody else in here that but I'm not. So the I understand your concerns. Quite honestly, I have my own concerns about the project at this point, especially with these PPA agreements. That's why when the PPA agreement was broken on Commonwealth Wind, the talks were stopped immediately. It was a Friday night. I was having a conversation just before Christmas with Town Manager Ells, and we both agreed that those, because honestly, it would give them an unfair advantage in the negotiating market if they decide to rebid. That was our consensus. And so if right now with a PPA agreement being discussed with Connecticut and so on and so forth, I have my concerns. Let's just say that. So with that, in my conversation with Councilor Cusack, which you referred to, and I guess you said it was a post on social media, and I'm going to tell you exactly what it was. We had a conversation on Saturday. He called me, says, I signed the petition, and what do you think about this? And I said, I'm well aware of the petition. I've already talked to leadership about it, and it was my plan already to have a conversation in October. At this point in time, it would not be suitable to have, and again, without your petition. I'm not saying your petition's not important, okay? Please understand. What I'm saying is that to everybody. Well, I'm just saying, like to anybody who signed that petition, anybody who signed, or even people who are listening who would have liked to sign the petition, or even people who didn't sign the petition and just want to talk about it. What I'm saying is that we understand. I can speak for a number of counselors. Councilor Atzos, who's not here, has had conversations with me about, we need to get them in front of us, but I want to make sure we have all the information. Well, at this point, my drop dead was October anyway. So with that, and again, if I involved them, we have workshops tonight, right? So if we had a workshop, we wouldn't be able to squeeze it into a 15-minute workshop without. We would have to have its own meeting. So with that, and again, a mutual set time, I think October would be good to get it because, I'm not saying expedited doesn't mean next week. We wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? I would give time for that. And again, we can discuss meeting. I will say that we can work through it to get a hybrid. We are set up for hybrid in here. If it exceeds the mass, we could try to set something else up at the high school if they have the technology. We have to make sure they have the technology.
If the high school cannot accommodate it, Cape Cod Community most likely can.
Very good.
I will tell you that every
It's just that
We'll-
no one at
we'll-
home can hear you talking
Right.
when you're there. So,
Yeah, but we will, I can say this, we will find a way, okay? So, and we'll work it out from there. Mr. Schulte, do you want to speak? Okay.
I'd just like to make it clear, the petition is not calling for another presentation from Avangrid. What you're just talking about was October, a presentation
No.
update from Avangrid?
No.
Okay.
It was an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, just want to be clear on that. And I just want to make one other comment. I know you said the Commonwealth has been stopped because of the situation with the PPAs. I want to make it clear on the PPAs for the Park City Wind project. At a recent Barnstable Conservation Commission, Ken Kimmel made a comment to the commission that there are contracts in place. I'll point out that the contracts, Avangrid's parent company has said that they cannot build the project under the contracts that they have in Connecticut. While there may technically be a contract, they've already said they cannot honor those, cannot build the project. So he's representing the Conservation Commission that there are contracts in place. Well, they've already announced that they cannot honor those contracts. And I've repeatedly asked at least 5 different times at presentations that they've given to Centerville Library, what is the status of those contracts? What are the negotiations? And repeatedly we're told, we're working on it, we're talking to stakeholders, that's all we can tell you right now. So for over 6 months now, we're being told that Avangrid is working on the contracts or the PPAs for the Park City Wind. So in essence, they have really no contracts. They've already said they can't honor those. So that's a big deal, and they have continued to avoid responding to the citizens. One last thing, Avangrid also owns the utility in Connecticut, United Illuminating. They are similar to an Eversource in Connecticut. This last week on Monday, after a rate case in which Avangrid's subsidiary, United Illuminated, was asking for an increase, and the Connecticut PURA, their regulatory agency, told them, no, we're not giving you what you wanted. Avangrid immediately has filed a lawsuit against PURA, complaining about their rates. This is just what they do. Whenever they don't get their way, they file a lawsuit. The same thing they did with the Edgertown Conservation Commission. They are just bullying the citizens, the towns, and I just want you to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schulte. I was aware of what you had said before that, and that's kind of why the drop dead was made for October, to have a discussion. And I was not aware of what you said towards the end there, so I appreciate the information. Anybody else want to speak to that before I come back to response to public comment? Okay. Response to public comment. Looking to my right. Anybody like to respond? Councilor Lutke, please.
Yes, I'd like to respond to everybody who spoke, and I'll take them in order. I guess Chuck and Sandy, you kind of go together, and you bring up some great points, and it has to do with communication. I know we had our strategy session maybe a month or so ago, and if you read our strategy and communication, it's the part of the strategy that's perhaps the most in need of help, and we admit that, and we've heard it here on the dais. How do we better communicate? Communication is the key to everything, and that's why I so applaud, when citizens come forward to speak, and when citizens do these petitions, and my goodness, Bob Schulte, the research that you do, and Suzanne Conley, of course, who's not here. I think it's amazing, the effort that you're taking to get the information. And Gordon had sent me a Zoom link the other night. The Sierra Club had a session with Dylan Fernandez, and I believe it was about renewable energy credits. And he had said that there's not a single town on Cape Cod that takes advantage of this program. And of course, wind power would figure into that. But when Dylan Fernandez began his talk, he spoke about we're the first. He kept saying we're the first to do this wind power, we're the first state. But, when you're the first to do something, that also requires due diligence. And perhaps we didn't do that. Perhaps we didn't think about the unintended consequences of being the first and, all the hoopla that comes with that. And I think we're facing that now. And it relates somewhat to what Felicia Penn spoke of, too. We go into things, and then once we're in it, because we are doing it for the first, we're the first to do the form-based zoning, we say, well, wait a minute, maybe we missed a couple things. And that's why I really applaud this effort to talk about this. And I know some months ago, I asked here on the dais why we hadn't responded to the new round of power purchase agreements, why we as a town hadn't put forward some concerns, because we had an opportunity ahead of that, and other municipalities, New Bedford commented, and perhaps this is an opportunity for some of the discussion that will come out of this meeting of the voters to put together something that we can send up to the governor. I don't think it's ever too late. We missed that deadline, but it's never too late when you're the first and you're the ones that are suffering the consequences. And I do say suffering because there's a lot of angst out here, and there's unknowns, and we are laying cables differently than I think the rest of the world is doing it. But there's a lot of unknowns here that we're going to get to the bottom of if we take the time. And in keeping with that, I know that Governor Healy on Monday sent a letter up, I guess, to President Biden having to do with the immigrant crisis and the housing. And we've been impacted, not here in Barnstable, but certainly next door in Yarmouth. And she sought some federal relief, because when you have down-directed policies like this mandate from President Biden to do this renewable energy by 2030, it cascades down, and then boom, Barnstable, you're on the front line. Good luck. Well, good luck back to you, because maybe your ambition we can't meet. Maybe we can't meet that ambition. So just as Governor Healy did, and she also got relief, I think I heard that today, some of what she asked for. You know, you can't keep bringing these migrants in and not helping us. And I see the same thing with this wind power. And that's why I say it's not too late to reach out to the state and bring forward some of the concerns that our wonderful citizens have dug up. So I'd say that. And then Felicia, I'm the liaison to the Main Street Waterfront Historic District, and I've watched them, and it's been a struggle, and it's an honest struggle. Everyone is trying. Asia, you commented last night. You commented beautifully. Felicia, you commented. I don't see anyone else, but I know those two did. You had different comments. Asia, your housing comments are always well thought out. You have personal experience that most of us don't have, and that speaks volumes. I will tell you that we cannot dismiss what the Main Street Waterfront Historic District is charged with. They wouldn't exist if we didn't care. So there is a difference, and I'll give you an example. The Hanover went through the Cape Cod Commission. It's that 270 unit out by BJ's, if you've seen it. I always say the only complaint I have is it's right in the flight line of runway 3315. But anyways, that project started almost on the same day going through the Cape Cod Commission, as did the 35 Scudder project. I commented on that project, said it was a good one. Everyone did. There were no complaints. That breezed right through. Our Fred Chirigotis chaired the commission for that. And he did a beautiful job, and off it went, and it's almost constructed. There's 270 units. Not a comment was made, virtually. And then the 35 Scudder, my goodness, I went to all of those meetings, because it's very close to where I am, and entirely different. And now it's tied up in a court case. But I'm speaking to you, Asia, that there has to be, those concerns have to be met too. But there's 270 units that are going to come online pretty darn quick. And other things, the residences at 850, things go through. But when you're on Main Street, there's a presence there, and that building hasn't met the criteria. And that's why the committee continues it. And that's why you have the comments that you do. And certainly nobody has any argument with the housing that you bring up. Nobody does. But that doesn't negate the need to have a building on Main Street that's worthy of being on Main Street, that fits the historic character.
Have no workforce housing here.
I think we have some, we need more. And that's one of the things I like about this particular project, Asia, that 2/3 of it is at a reduced AMI. And we've all understood that WIN has the ability in their back office to run the lottery. So we're not going to have units open for months. And that was another thing Governor Healy addressed. Throughout the state, thousands of units because they don't have the lottery in place. So we're addressing that. But I don't think We need a confrontation between our citizens when we're trying to achieve the same thing. We all want housing, but we want to maintain some character and environmental integrity. And you can disagree, absolutely, that's your right. Joanne, thank you. I know you joined in on helping with that petition. I signed the petition. I think it's wonderful when people work together on this. And, the final thing on Felicia's, back to that. I've watched these meetings, and I think the right thing is happening, but we're struggling. And if we had done, I think what Felicia said, there was a gentleman last night, I don't recall his name. It sounded like he had a great deal of planning experience. And he spoke of what Felicia was saying. If we had better guidelines, we wouldn't have this disconnect. Everyone has in their mind's eye what the right building looks like, but nobody agrees. And it's kind of like when you do those vision tests and they keep changing the lenses until it's like, oh, that's right. You know it when you see it. And I applaud the commission. And Jeff, you were there last night. And I think that perhaps maybe we get a subcommittee together to look at the zoning, and maybe we look at some amendments to tweak it, because it's not fair to the developers. Now they're being asked to come back a third time, but it's not fair to us to not ask them to come back a third time. So I support what Felicia's saying. As I guess she commented, and I'd like to see that, President Levesque, if we could take that on and just look at the zoning and see if there's something we could do to better help, so when developers come in, we have a closer match. Because we're having, sincere people speaking, and the commission is doing what they can, but they're not ready to vote on it because it's not there yet. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Lutke. Anybody else? Council Cusack, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for those clarifying remarks a little bit earlier. And folks are right to comment on the fact that I had commented to expedite the the petition to have this open conversation. And I just want folks to know that, I really support having an open conversation about these wind farm issues. I think my point was generally that I felt like the citizens deserve to have an opportunity to weigh some bits of information about all the folks who might one day compose this body. And so that was my interest in trying to promote the speed of that, just because I think the council itself needs the education on the science and the economics, as well as much as our citizens do. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to listen and learn, and to also bolster democracy, really, and do the basic functions of democracy, which is to listen to each other civilly and choose a direction based off a consensus. So I know we're obligated to listen and learn, and I look forward to doing it hopefully sometime this fall in this type of forum. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Cusack. Anybody else on this side? Councilor Schnapp?
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, thank you for everyone who came out tonight. The passion is very evident in your prepared remarks, your persistence in coming before us, and I hope that we can deliver on the meeting sooner than later, but also at a time where everyone has a chance to be notified and have a way to get to that meeting. Ms. Penn, I appreciate your remarks and the clever way in which you presented them. It makes public comment that much more interesting. I would like to direct a question to Ms. Director Jenkins, whether it's now or during Town Manager's report, to just get a little bit of clarification on the form-based zoning and what the design requirements are within the zoning, and then also the status of the design guidelines that were also referenced.
Director Jenkins, would you like to answer that now?
Good evening, councilors, public. Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development. So as we saw in the newly adopted quote-unquote form-based zoning regulations for downtown Hyannis, they take the typical dimensional requirements that are in zoning, significantly further and regulate specifically the form of the building, placement on the lot, height of stories, and very specifically, to Councilor Ludke's comments, the interactions between the public realm and the private realm, how a building relates to the street through a series of different techniques, including frontage types, including step back on stories, and a number of other sort of general details, largely meant to regulate the building envelope and form. So those are sort of the I guess the details that are included in the zoning. And what that gives you is, essentially a box. What the role of the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission does, and the role of our design and infrastructure plan, is to take that box and find what materials and designs are appropriate on that box for Hyannis Main Street waterfront. So as the subsequent and last part of the project to update our downtown Hyannis zoning was an effort which has been ongoing and led by our senior regulatory staff between the planning board and the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic, much in the fashion that we spoke to last night by folks who commented at that. To take a lot of time to walk up and down Hyannis Main Street and identify the features and the materials and the colors that they thought most appropriate, and incorporate those into a document that includes both regulations, the minimum that we would like to see, that projects must comply with, as well as additional guidelines, things that are preferences, to give a developer certainty in terms of what will bring them success throughout that planning project. So that has been a project that has been in the works for the past 6 to 8 months. Again, it's been presented multiple times at multiple public meetings at Hyannis Historic and Planning Board, and I believe we just closed a 30-day public comment period on those design guidelines. And I will note, particular to the Wynn project at 307 Main Street, our senior regulatory staff has been working with them as those design guidelines get developed to adjust the project and to make sure, even though they're not final, they're very close to draft form to bring that project as close to compliance with those design regulations, the regulations in the design guidelines as possible. And I think we had an incredibly successful series of Hyannis Historic District Commission meetings in which you saw them bring to the table a project that was slightly more modern and really listen to the comments of the community, of the Historic District Commission, go through the guidelines, and produce something that I think everybody at that meeting agreed was much more responsive and reflective of the palette and the orientation to the street that we would like to see. So in terms of final adoption of those design guidelines, they do need still a final vote from Hyannis Historic and a final vote from the Planning Board. Again, we just closed the public comment period, and those will come imminently. And just to speak to, the comment on mixed use, if I may, the zoning regulations do include requirements for active storefronts. We carried forward the requirements that were in the 2005 zoning that were put forward by the Planning Board to require active use between Barnstable Road, Ocean Street, and C Street. Now, that's an almost mile-long stretch where we are required to have active use. This one block and the subsequent blocks on the east end did not have that requirement. But again, that's an incredibly large stretch to maintain year-round business activity, and certainly the addition of year-round residential units in this location will be a benefit to the commercial businesses downtown.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. So my understanding of what you just said, the design guidelines, even though they haven't been finalized, have seemed to be incorporated into the process in which this building has been evaluated and has morphed over the
That's
meetings.
correct. And again, I think if you look at the rendering side by side, you'll see that suggestion for those that push and pull of buildings really went a long way in terms of, I think, dealing with some of both the public and the commission's concerns regarding breaking up that massing. But it is incredibly important, when we think about this, to have that, to have those buildings pushed up close to the street. What we want to prevent is that feeling of a wall. And it's that push-pull, the landscaping, the frontage requirements that they have gone back and incorporated, and are getting close to success. Again, to use the words of the chair of the Historic District Commission, tweaks at this point, but Wynn is, I think, listening and being trying to be responsive to the community concerns.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Schnapp. Any other comment on this side? Vice President Cullen, please.
Yes, my comment is to Ms. Graves, who comes up and shown her face several times in the past couple of months. It occurs to me as you text me sometimes that your ideas are brilliant sometimes, because we're old up here and we don't really think the way you think. So you texted me recently that a commitment of 40-year-old or a committee of 40-year-olds and under might be a great idea. And to take that a step further, I mean, it's an election year this year, right? And I think it's the odd precincts that will have 4 years and the evens that will have 2. And I know it's a commitment, and I'm talking down the road. But as I look around this room, I think you might be the only renter. I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing. You might be the only renter in this room. And we're talking about you and your future, right? And your colleagues and your life. So it just occurs to me that there's a wealth of information and progress that could be made if we could move some of the seats on this council to people like you. So please think about that and invest time in us. It's, we're working on building human capital in this town, and it takes a long time to build trust and make inroads with community members that we haven't had conversations with in the past. So I hope you take it to heart. And don't stop talking about the things that matter to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Cullen. Looking to my left, anybody like to public comment? Anyone? Okay. Then I would close public comment. Again, thank you for everybody who participated during public comment. Lots of great discussion, and again, look forward to the meeting in October. We can have a more robust conversation about what's happening in regards to wind energy in the town of Barnstable. So thank you. That being said, it is now time for the town manager communications. The town manager report has been pre-recorded and is available to town council and the public. The report will be prepared in written form and posted on the town manager's website as in the past. The town manager and staff will be available to answer any questions regarding the report as presented. The town manager's communication for the period of September 8th through September 21st, 2023 included an update on 1. Update on budget action calendar. 2. Update on a natural resource division MESA permit. 3. Announcement on the process to select additional local comprehensive planning committee members. 4. An update on pending watershed permit resulting from the July 7th, 2023 changes to Title V and watershed permit regulations. 5. Information on the town's water resource management efforts. 6. Information regarding the Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day scheduled for Saturday, September 25th, 2023 from 9 a.m. to noon at the transfer station in Marston's Mills. 7. Information on the 55-plus Community Safety Day on Thursday, September 28th, 2023 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Barnstable Adult Community Center. And 8, the final item, information on emerging contaminant challenges. So that being said, would any town councilors like to comment or have a question in regards to town manager's report? Councilor Lutke, please.
Yeah, I have one question, and it has to do with the beach raking. And thank you so much for taking the effort to get that accomplished, I guess, for, Craigville and Covels. That'll be great for next summer. I noticed you don't have Fortes Beach, and that may be because it's not designated. Is that the rationale for that? Because I do know, because that is in my precinct and I walk there frequently, that there is a nesting pair of plovers that's on the other side, and the chicks run over there. Is that the rationale? It's not listed? Is that why you're not pursuing it? Or is it, I just wonder why Fortes Beach isn't on your list.
I'd have to talk, Markel's town manager. I'd like to talk with Nina Coleman to find out and get you a detailed answer. I know that for any of the remaining areas that will be subject to these regulations and therefore this permit, we're proceeding with that, and we expect to have them in place by next season. But I don't have a specific answer relative to, Fortes Beach for you, so. More than happy to get it, though.
Okay, no, that would be great. I just hate to see it left out. But I do
Yeah.
remember seeing a map earlier this year when all of this was going on, that it looked like that beach was not included, so perhaps that's the rationale. But I just, if you could
Yeah, I don't want
double
to
check,
speculate.
'cause-
It
yeah, I know.
could be that it's not clearly
I
designated.
wouldn't want it left
be,
out. I wouldn't want it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Starr, please.
Thank you, Mr. Levesque. My comment is basically a thank you for clarifying the Hyannis water supply and the fact that we don't have the deficit, and that we're working on supply, and everything's in good. Everybody should be confident that we have plenty of water and nobody's going to run out of water at the moment.
Thank you very much for that, Councilor Starr. To piggyback on that, I actually would like to thank you, Town Manager Ellis, because that actually has been a request of mine too, because there is some, misinformation out there, and we just want to clarify that so that people are not alarmed when housing projects and things of that come up, that we are ready and we have the infrastructure to support that. But furthermore, can we have Director Santos? I believe he has some additional comments in regards to that that he might be able to offer and help us. Thank you. Thank you, Director Santos.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Councilors, Dan Santos, Director of Public Works. Councilor Starr, thank you. I think you kind of said what I was going to say, but with a little more detail. So we have been successfully running the Hyannis water system for 18 years since it was purchased in 2005. And throughout this time, our goal has been to improve the system and understand all aspects of it, make it as good a system as it can be, and to provide all the water that's needed in Hyannis for firefighting and water use. And I think we've very successfully done that and managed some pretty difficult challenges, and we'll continue to. So part of that is doing planning. And we developed a document in 2019 to look at future water sources and how we're going to go about providing additional water sources in the future, because this town is going to be here forever, and we're going to have to keep providing water one way or another. And so the town has an engineering staff, very professional, trained experts in these things. We hire consultants where we need to supplement. And in this case, we put out a report that looked at water demand and needs in the future. So there's been some misinformation, erroneous information. I'm not going to address why or how, but the fact is there's context that is with this report, okay? And the deficit that people are talking about is a paper deficit. We've never run out of water. We've never come close to running out of water. We haven't purchased water since 2020 when we brought our Mar treatment plant online. Believe me that if there were a crisis or a problem, I'd be the first one up here talking to you about what we need to do about it. So this report is in the normal planning that we do. And basically, you can look at things. I'll just go to one of the conclusions of the report that's being used where we have a deficit. And I quote, "Thus it would appear that the quantities of water available from existing sources are adequate to meet current demands of the system." And when this report was written, we had 2 wells down. 2 wells weren't included. In 2020, we brought one of those wells online, Straightway number 2, 750,000 gallons a day. And right now we are, and you have approved the funding for this, contracting for bringing back the Mary Dunn number 4 well, for next summer, another 750,000 gallons per day. So that's 1.5 million gallons per day, more than we have. Our average daily requirement is 2.3 million gallons per day. The maximum, which is rarely, the maximum we've ever used is about 5 million gallons per day. That was during a drought, that was in 2022, and that wasn't for a lengthy period of time. So this report actually concluded we have adequate for current needs. We've brought on 1.5 million gallons more, and what's not mentioned here is we have 3 million gallons of storage in our system. We have storage tanks at a number of our well sites. So there's another 3 million gallons beyond the 5 million gallons we can pump per day available. So we're not in a deficit. And I'm happy to meet with anyone, any of you individually, to go through this so you can understand better, because this is complicated. It's engineering. And the reason why this shows a deficit on paper is because of DEP requirements that we have pretty much full redundancy in our system. So if our major source, and that doesn't mean a well because we go through a treatment plant. So if our major treatment plant went offline for some reason, then we have to be able to provide water with our other sources. That only makes sense, right? But the chances of that happening are pretty, about the only thing that would cause that to happen would be a meteor falling out of the sky and completely destroying the treatment plant and all the wells at the Mary Dunn well site. And this is just not, it's not a reasonable situation. But these are the requirements that they have. And so that's why we put this report together, so to predict in the future what our needs would be under that scenario. And we have done a number of things. We've brought treatment to all our wells. We've brought all our wells back online. The next one will be in the summer. And we continue to look for new sources for wells. And we're also looking, as part of our comprehensive wastewater management plan, looking at how we use the water from the treatment plant. And there are going to be water reuse opportunities. We're generating 2 million gallons a day and up to 4 million gallons a day in the future of clean water effectively. So that's another resource. So I guess I just want you to understand that we've been managing this, we're on this, and this is nothing remarkable to us. This is the nature of how we do business. And the last thing I want to say is engineers by training and nature are very conservative. And generally, we're doubling the need. So there's a factor of safety in some parts of engineering, structural engineering, right? You want to be doubly safe so that we don't want calamities and catastrophes. There's peaking factors. We look at doubling a factor. So there's plenty of room, if you will. And for those reasons, I'm not personally concerned. We're on the right track. You've funded the projects that will continue to allow this system to grow and improve to provide the best water in the town. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them now, or if you want to, again, please come in. We love having you come in and talk to us. And
Councilor Lecky, you have a question for Director Santos?
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan. That was a beautiful, comprehensive look at what's going on. That helps, because I've seen the comments out there, too, about the water. So it's great to address that. The search for new wells, the one in Barnstable, is that for future use? Is that to increase the redundancy? Is that to take off a well here and replace it? What is the people, I think, are confused about the purpose of that new well if all of our wells are pumping beautifully and all filtered?
Sure. That is to address that requirement from DEP for redundancy if one of our systems goes completely offline, that we have to provide enough water. If that happened, we would have a problem. And so this searching for new sources, be it reuse of water or providing new wells in other parts of town, that is addressing exactly that regulatory requirement.
And just a follow-up on that, you gave the example like the Mary Dunn well is being struck by a meteor.
Yeah.
Would any of the other well complexes, is Mary Dunn pumping more? Like, the Straightway and Hyannisport wells, they go off? Would it happen, is any one of the wells a critical point, or?
We have 3 complexes. We have 11 wells in our system, basically in 3 areas. Mary Dunn Road, Mar well system over off Old Yarmouth Road, and then Hyannisport, Simmers Pond, in that area off Smith Street. So, and they all pump about the same amount of water per day. So it's about a third, about. With right now, the Mar being the greatest because that treatment plant is the newest one and that can put through the most water. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question you had, but
No,
that's,
I was just
that's the
curious. So
status.
any one of those could go out, but that's what the new well is for, possibly new growth and for the redundancy, or just for redundancy?
It's for both.
For both, okay.
We've done growth projections when we did this report that came out in 2019 based on use through 2016. Well, before we started designing for our new treatment plant and what we're doing now, we wanted to revisit that. So let's see how those projections panned out. Well, they were much more conservative than really has turned out. We are much have used much less water than they were predicting for 2020. And so we have adjusted our projections based on that. But water demand has grown and will continue to grow. And we want to make sure that we're meeting that challenge. And that's why we're doing all these things, is so that when we need to have that water, we will have it. And I guess the last point is that we have a very tight system for both water and wastewater. When projects come to the town, they come to my office and they ask us, can you serve us? Here's our projected water use, wastewater need. Can you provide infrastructure? So we go through that. We go through our system, our projections, what they're proposing, and we tell them yes or no. And in the case of recent projects, ones you've mentioned, the ones that are 35 Scudder Ave, they came to us in 2020 and asked us and said, here's what we're proposing. We went back to them and said, yes, we have capacity in our system to accommodate this project. So we put a lot of thought into that. We don't just say yes to everyone. That's not the way to proceed. But we have formulas and ways to look at these demands so that we can accommodate the infrastructure growth.
Any other questions on this side? Director Santos. Councilor Schnapp, please.
I have a few questions, but they're related to the wastewater management update. So I didn't know if people wanted to just continue on this topic first.
Sure. While we do that first, thank you, Councilor Schnapp. Any other questions for this topic with Councilor Mendes, please? Sure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, President Levesque. And thank you, Dan, for the comprehensive explanation about water. But while you were talking about that, I talked about the real issue of this town isn't water. It's not housing. It's misinformation. That's the problem with this town, and that's the problem. We have a housing issue, yes, but people use things like paper statistics to make a point about a problem that we don't have. And there's nothing wrong with honest debate. There's nothing wrong with honest disagreement. But once you use false information, all that does is divide us. That's why we find ourselves in the positions that we're in now. If you come with honesty, at least people can respect you, and there won't be so much animosity. So thank you very much for that explanation, because people were using that last night against this project. And I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm not saying I'm against the project. But what I'm saying is, as a town, we need to be honest with each other and at least come from a point where we're working with facts and not lies and deceit to try to get your point across. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mendes. Anybody else on this side about this topic specific? Oh, Councilor Starr.
Thank you. I just had a comment. Was it Ms. Jones was here earlier talking about communication, and that's sort of we're talking about that's a problem in town. I think it has a lot to do with local newspapers. I mean, Lynn does a great job, but we don't have a public way of passing information around. I think I don't think the town has ever passed out false information. I don't know where. Yeah, okay, so, but, but we need to correct that quickly, and and we can do it here, but if, I read the Cape Cod Times every day, so it should be, I wish it was there. So.
I agree with
Maybe I
you.
should call the reporters more often and say, there's misinformation out there, get on it right now. Talk to Dan.
Remember when again, want to get too off topic, but I remember when there was a reporter from the Cape Cod Times in our meetings, at every meeting. Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. So
Thank you.
that's a good point, Councilor Starr. So with that, I don't see any other comment in regards to this topic. Councilor Schnepp, did you have questions more for Town Manager Ells or Director Santos?
I have one that I'm not sure who it's best directed at.
They're both
but
right there, so.
Thank you, Mr. President. But it had to do with the PFAS question, and something I heard on the radio, I think today or yesterday, a report on a survey in Massachusetts, I think it might have been done by Mass Inc., about the concerns that people have with private wells and not knowing what they're drinking. And I know that there are some abilities to find out what's in your water for a private well, and I think it's mostly done by the county, but could someone clarify if someone's concerned about what's in their water, how they can find out what's in it?
I can get that information. The manager may have it.
Best route is what Director Santos suggested. I think testing for PFAS is complicated, and I want to check, first of all, the various certified locations where people can do it. If you've noticed the last two, but I plan to do this hopefully for a long time
Right.
as your town manager, and inform our public on this issue. So I'll make sure I include the information that I get from health or DPW relevant to anybody who wants to, test. I've had people, I think I had one conversation with a counselor, but I've had public talk with me about the fact that as a result of the Silent Spring work, they tested with PFAS in their blood. And so I had a really wonderful conversation about, it's a scary conversation, but a wonderful conversation about this issue, and not only about what we drink, but what we eat and what we breathe and what we may absorb through our skin and what we buy as consumers. And the fact that there's no regulations relevant to the levels of PFAS in most products in the Commonwealth. On top of that, we have point sources like a concern with fire foam at a location. And I've also gone to our superintendent, and she's authorized me to talk with the high school. So though I will continue to broadly communicate with our public, I'm going to target our youth and engage them in this. I've said many times that modifying my behavior as an adult or a consumer is far more difficult than the youth. The youth are asking me, Mark, Mr. Manager, why haven't you addressed this? Why haven't you solved this? Sewers, water, emerging contaminants, coastal resiliency, I can keep going. So I'm going to spend a lot of time there as well communicating, and hopefully they'll carry that home. But we'll get this piece of information for where people can sample their private wells. All I can tell you is nationwide, we're finding emerging contaminants everywhere. I had a conversation, I was out at the bogs, and one of the conversations I had with the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs was about PFAS and about how people are scaring other people, Councilor Mendez, about PFAS and about other issues with inaccurate information. And how do we put together a group of leaders so that we can communicate in a responsible way, the way that our Public Works Department manages the water system for Hyannis. That was a private company, basically, and we purchased it because of the deteriorating quality and quantity, and we've turned it around. And so we had that discussion about PFAS. So I think you'll see us, like the nation, even more aggressively engaged in this because they're going to come out with additional regulations. And if everybody doesn't understand it and then begin to stop using products that contain these emerging contaminants, when we get rid of the fire foams or the point sources, and it's still coming out of our homes because we're still using it, and it recycles through the systems, and we begin to expand our sewer system, but it's not just that, it's sludge too. And that comes into the treatment plant, and they say, well, it's the treatment plant's fault, when it's really not. It's us that are putting this into the environment. We need an educated public. So thank you for the platform, but really important issues. You'll see it. You've heard it in my last two. You will hear it consistently here forward, because these are going to be major issues, major regulatory changes that are going to impact Cape Cod. To the other issue, to broaden what Director Santos said in response to why are we looking in West Barnstable, along the moraine, all the way to the Fish and Wildlife land in Hyannis and Barnstable Village, because we live on top of the water we drink. And when you're able to go into other areas that don't have the density, that don't have the land uses on top of the water we drink, we have a much better chance of being able to find waters that don't contain the things that are underneath our most commercialized area, for example. And that makes good sense. So for future planning, we're looking along the moraine, and please, everybody, this has been available to the public. We've been out in public numerous times discussing this issue, and people don't show up. And I don't know what to say about it. I know West Barnstable's very engaged at this point. So yes, communication, it was brought up earlier, is key to this, but they don't come out. But this has been available. We've been talking about it. It's being a little bit, I think, not understood and used in recent discussions. But we're here, and we're always available, and we'll continue to communicate by every means possible relevant to it. But that's why we're looking across the moraine, because it makes good sense. You wouldn't look to put new wells underneath the most densely developed area of a community. Thank you.
And down gradient.
Can I make one more?
Absolutely.
Thank you, President
Councilor
Levesque.
Starr.
Just two comments, I guess. One is that the water that comes out of the Marwell system, the treatment plant, is the cleanest water on Cape Cod. I want just so that they know, Hyannis has got the cleanest water. The other, I just want to make a quick comment that Julian Sear has a bill at the State House to ban PFAS in many household products where it's not really needed. And also to create a remediation trust fund, so we can clean up some of these, create a trust fund to clean up some of these areas.
Yeah, we've already begun to incentivize products that we purchase, products that we use in construction that don't contain them. The challenge is that it is commercialized, and it is okay to use them, and it isn't regulated regardless of the level.
It's part of modern life.
So it creates challenges, but Barnstable's one of the first, and we actually put it in the bid for the new turf out at the football field. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom Andrels. Thank you, Councilor Starr. I think Councilor Schnapp still has more questions.
Back to Director Santos. I have three somewhat unrelated questions regarding our CWMP, and I have to praise the water resources management updates. They're very clear, and it makes it easy for anybody to go in and sort of look and see what's going on, and then also maybe ask a question or two. So I'll start with the easiest one, I think. I know on the Finney's Lane pump station is coming into form, and since we've been talking about a lot of aesthetics this evening, I'm wondering what is that going to look like, and is there a picture available that we can see what that pump station's going to look like?
Yes, there is, and I can get it to you, and we can, we've had meetings about it in the past, and it's been shown, but if you'd like a wider distribution, sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I know some pump stations you never see because they're underground, and then there's other that are buildings, and so this one obviously is going to be a building because there's framing going up. So
it's designed to fit into the area, look like a house, basically, be attractive and not industrial at all.
second question revolves around, I know that we are anticipating starting to connect our sewer system, our expansion of our sewer system to new users, probably as early as this spring. Are there still some bits and pieces that need to be figured out with our Board of Health in terms of hookups, or where are we in that process?
Well, the biggest thing is with the Board of Health is what time frame will be required. People will be required to hook up, so that's a fact. The question, and it's within the Board of Health's jurisdiction, is what time frame will that be? The Public Works recommendation to them has been 6 months. They have written a draft policy which says that, and they've discussed it, and it continues to be on their agenda as a held item. I understand, though, recently in talking with the Health Division supervisor that that's likely to be brought back on for discussion soon, because it needs to be. That policy needs to be made well before we start hooking people up so they can plan and understand what that's going to be. So that's my best understanding of where it is right now, and they understand, and we've made clear the need to get this addressed, and hopefully they'll do that very shortly.
Can I just follow up on that real quick?
Yeah, I was about to ask you.
Yeah. So I've actually had this has been a topic of conversation between myself and Town Manager Ells. It's something that I've been pushing for, even maybe suggesting that we have a joint meeting at some point in time. But in the meantime, though, I know Town Manager Ells, if you want to comment of our discussion and where maybe this is heading forward, in any of your plans that you have at this point.
I believe the draft procedures Director Santos is discussing is on. It's been carried on the agenda, but it's going to come up, I think, at the next meeting at Board of Health.
Right.
So they're aware of the timing of this, and I believe they're going to be responsive. I don't know how it will progress at the next meeting. Certainly myself, Director Santos, legal, anybody else that they need there will be there, because we need to get closure on this and move forward.
Thank you.
And just so you know, I've been pushing for that.
Yeah. So I have one more question. I think it goes back to Mr. Director Santos. And it kind of wraps into the earlier conversation we had during public comment about Park City Wind. How much of our design considerations for the Centerville Village sewer expansion are either dependent or completely independent of what might happen with Park City Wind project?
Pretty independent, other than the route, which makes sense to you go and tear up the same streets and have construction in one place. But I can't think of, and I'll ask Griffin Bowden, the town engineers here, if he knows more about specific design decisions that are hinged to Park City, but I'm not aware of any. No, we'd be doing the same thing regardless.
So if Park City Wind went away, we would just move right
Yes.
forward and it wouldn't be impacting our project?
That's right. Yeah.
Would it result in some additional costs because we would have to assume some things that we would have hoped Park City would do?
Primarily the final paving.
Paving, okay.
That's really the biggest savings for us is with the case of Vineyard Wind or Park City, they're responsible ultimately for the final paving of the road, so we save those costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Schnapp. Looking to my left, any questions for Town Manager Ells? Councilor Clark, please, or Director Santos.
Thank you very much, President Levesque. Just a comment. I see on the town manager's update, number 7 regarding the 55+ Community Safety Day, and I'm glad to see that happening. It's great outreach to the community, but the hours are from 10 to 4, and I know of some 55 and over people who are still working during those hours. So maybe if the adult community center could consider maybe extending it to 6 o'clock next year to accommodate the traditional working hours. Just a suggestion.
Yes, I'll bring that message back. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Clark. Any other comment, question for staff in regards to town manager's report? Okay, not seeing any.
If I might
final word, sir.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. I've already taken too much time. Two issues where we had comment earlier on wind projects. I think it's real important for our public to understand, and when I've had the opportunity to go out in public, I've tried to take the time to explain the process, both federal, state, local, and much of the permitting that's involved, and all of this comment. It needs to be heard here, but it needs to be heard at the state level as well. They are the ones who hold the permitting authority for the majority of what occurs. It's really important that our public understand that. Secondly, there's a really important deadline coming up on the 29th of September for this proposed Commonwealth Wind project. It is the comments on the draft EIR, Environmental Impact Report, though many of us might feel, well, I'm going to go to Mark Ells or I'm going to go to a counselor. It's really important that everybody, even down to the individual, make your comments known, and you can do it pretty simply through the website. If you can't find it, let us know. We will help you find it and comment. Go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
I was just going to ask if there's any way that could be forwarded to all the counselors so they could get it out to
I'll ask
constituents
Lynn
of meeting.
Poyant to grab that link. Is that okay, Lynn? And forward it to the council? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. And I just think it's important that the public realize that. And I know when I get the opportunity, I certainly go out and share that with the public, but I don't always know that everyone's there. When we don't have something pending before us, many times it's a hearing at the council, perhaps, where we would publicly discuss things. I certainly get invited to numerous village associations where many such topics come up, but certainly when this does, I always take the opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Town Manager. Councilor Clark.
Thank you very much, President Levesque. Perhaps going on your suggestion, Town Manager, perhaps that link could be included in the town's e-newsletter, thanks to Lynn Poyant. And so it can be shared with a larger audience than just us, we counselors.
Yeah, that's fine. I just think it's important, though, that the public understand where the permitting authority falls. I think it's really important. And most people don't. And I've talked to hundreds of people as well. And every time I do, especially when it's a new face, they really don't fully understand where the authority for permitting projects like this falls. And so it's important that we hear them, and it's important that they know where else their comment needs to be heard. Okay.
Is there a place on the web that link? Because it's only a few days, 8 days away.
On our website? Typically, we're very cautious. Well, we can find a location and make it easily accessible.
A way
we can do that. We don't want to become a conduit for an agency or a proponent or anybody else, because if for some reason that link doesn't work, we want them to go to the source, not to, understood, yeah. Because that has failed before, and that can be problematic. So, and again, we're not the proponent of this. So, not of any of them, quite honestly. So, thank you.
Thank you, Town Manager Jones, for that clarification. Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Vice President, if you could help me please act on the minutes.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of September 7th, 2023, as written.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion in regards to the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, not seeing any. Please signify your approval by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
I believe it's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 8, communications. Any announcements from elected officials, boards, committees, staff, commission reports, correspondence, or announcements? Anything to my left? Councilor Shaughnessy, please.
I just wanted to mention that this Sunday at Asselton Park is our Fall Love Live Local Fest, so you can come out and support small local vendors and businesses and mingle with members of your community.
Thank you. Any other announcements on this side? Looking to my right, any announcements? Councilor Cusack, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, and Osterville has punted on this weekend. It looks like the weather is looking pretty iffy on Saturday and Sunday. So we have our Fall Fest is now going to be on Saturday the 30th. So I just want folks to know that if they were planning to come to Osterville this weekend, the Fall Fest is not till next Saturday. And then as part of the town manager's report, there was also a mention about LCP membership. And, you know, I just want to put a word out there to encourage a wide range of voices, you know, to potentially participate. I have not, I have to admit, looked at the list of 17 or so folks since earlier in the year, but I just wonder if we have, you know, vets on the LCP, younger folks on the LCP, folks with disabilities on it, non-English speakers. I think we just got to diversify the representation there potentially and reflect our population. So that's just an encouragement to apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cusack. Councilor Snap, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Cusack, for teeing up my further announcement on the process that we're trying to expand the local comprehensive planning committee. And as you said, it's currently comprised of representatives of all 7 villages and members of several town boards and committees. We're seeking to, the town manager, who is actually the individual who would be making these appointments, is looking to help diversify representation on the committee and to ensure the committee's makeup is reflective of the community's population and is therefore seeking applications particularly from those who rent their home, people of color, people with disabilities, and people whose first language is not English. So we have applications available that will be on the website. It will go out in e-news tomorrow. There was a press release, I think, that went out yesterday. Town councilors, I'll make sure you have a copy of this. It has links to the application. It's a very short application form, and hopefully nobody will be discouraged from completing it. But there's a fairly short turnaround time. Applications will be due at 4 o'clock on Friday, October 6, 2023. So there's more information in the release that will make sure that gets out to everyone. And thank you again, Councilor Cusack.
Thank you, Councilor Schnapp. Any other announcements? Okay, not seeing any announcements. I would say now time would be good for a 5-minute break, and then we'll jump right into our workshop, 1 on private roads and 2 on the 0% interest through the flow neutral. Thank you so much. We'll be back in 5 minutes. If we can begin to find our seats, we're going to continue on with our workshops.
Yep.
What do we have first? Private roads.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to our town council meeting. Here we are, September 21st, first day of fall. And our first item on our autumn specials here is we have a workshop on private roads, policy workshop. We've had a number of discussions in regards to this, and Town Manager Els is here to lead us from the discussion. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mark Els, Town Manager, and thank you for this opportunity to continue our discussion on private roads. We actually began this back in a workshop of July of 2022, but as I reviewed my files, I actually was like, when I got hired, it was one of the committees under the Public Works Commission, and then by 96 and 98, we had a roads committee, private roads committee in town, and developed a report. So it's been a long-standing effort on behalf of our community to address private roads. Real quick, some stats just to refresh everybody, and then I'll get into kind of the meat of what I would like to talk with the council about this evening. But, you know, we've got about 250 miles of public roads, 700 public roads. A little under 60% of our residents live on these public roads. They're the bigger roads, typically, but not always. Private roads, 200 miles, 1,100 private roads in Barnstable. And about 40% of our residents live on them. So a lot of our residents live on them. It is on our website, so if you're in property lookup, you can at least get the answer, is it a public or a private road that I live on? But most people still don't know the difference. They think a private road is a road that the public can't drive on. That is absolutely not the case. So we have a lot of them. Now, just to refresh everybody, for these 250 miles of public roads, we have a public roads capital program, we call it a pavement management program. We evaluate the pavement, the condition, the associated costs. We come up with what we recommend based on the age and condition so that we maximize the use of dollars to extend the useful life of public roads and to maintain a certain level of quality in those public roads. And with the budget that we ask for, we pretty consistently hold at that level. That's capital. On the operations side, really it's our engineering and DPW administration and our highway division that service public roads. And so it's not all for roads, but a big chunk of it is. For admin and engineering, that's a $2 million budget. For highway, it's almost a $5 million budget for those operating divisions. I say that to you because if we add an inventory of another 200 miles of public roads, we're going to have to proportionally increase operating budgets. I'll come back to that in a minute. We provide snow and ice response on all roads in Barnstable, public and private. I can tell you, though, that when you begin to look at the conditions of roads during an ice or a snowstorm with a cold spell afterwards, these roads, these private roads that are in disrepair, are some of the major complaints we get from our residents. And it's because of the conditions of the road and the pavement and the ability to plow it or clear it. So there's lots of implications of this. Not just that everybody lives on a paved surface, and therefore they think that the town should maintain that paved surface, okay? And that it's accessible to buses and us and police and fire, et cetera, okay? Our Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee has commented continuously that we need to look at our private roads. It is a deteriorating asset of the community. It is there in place, and that we need to establish policy regarding how to maintain this in the community. I spoke with you all last July, and coming out of that meeting, it was pretty much me just presenting kind of the history of private roads with some of these stats, and then I asked you all, should we proceed with a continuation of discussion regarding private roads, taking of private roads? And the council said yes to me. So that's why I have a big, bold yes here. So what did I do from there? I began to organize our resources. I talked to Public Works, I talked to legal, I talked to finance, so we've gone forward since last July with organizing this in a way that helps us to look at the different types of roads in Barnstable that were private. Now, this also coincides with the fact that we are implementing our comprehensive wastewater management plan. And in doing so, not only do we need to go into public and private roads to put in sewer, we need to repave them after we do that construction work. So as a former public works person and as your town manager, when that investment is made by our community, we want it to last a full, useful life. When you don't maintain roads, and we can certainly have a workshop whenever you would like to talk about our pavement management system and the various types of maintenance and what the value of that is when you do it correctly versus what it costs to, what the costs are when you don't do it properly. And for the most part, our private roads are not maintained properly. There's no way we want to go into these roads, put in a sewer, and then repave them and not see them maintained properly. So that, along with the fact that the state revolving fund, which is one of the major opportunities for us to secure funding and even both low interest and principal forgiveness on these projects, requires us now to have a formal easement or to take the road as public so that we're eligible for those expenses. It hasn't always been that way. We're coming before you under the CWMP, and we've done it twice now. I think we've done 2 batches of roads, and it's going to continue to secure easements, but really the bigger question is related to what I'm going to ask you in a minute, relevant to the CWMP. So the fact that these exist, the fact that they're deteriorating, the fact that we're doing the CWMP all brought us to a formal discussion last year as we were proceeding with the CWMP. We also have primary and collector roads. Now, I'll refer to those differently later and I'll explain why, but those are major roadways in town that are private. And I'll get to this. I think there's about 44 or so of them in our community. And if I, bless you, and if I went through the list of them, you'd say, I can't believe that's a private road. The roads we drive over every day that connect major areas of our town, okay? So should we look, bless you, should we look to make those public? We've also had our residents participate in our temporary repair to private roads program. And that's a program where the resident comes in, they pay for the upgrades, and we general contract it for them, basically. Now, I told you my history in this because until 2002, when our and that was basically from 98 to 2002, when, because it was a recommendation of the Roads Committee and all the work we had done prior, until 2002, when they did this, when they participated in temporary repair to private road program, the town took the road when they had invested up front to make it a road that had a useful life that we could maintain. After 2002, it's the reason that I said I'd come back to relevant to the budget, I became Public Works Director in 2002. And so one of my first budgetary discussions with the town manager was about the fact that we had taken in 2004, I think 64 roads that had participated in some way in this temporary repair to private road program. And we were coming through a recession from 2002 to 2005, if you remember, was a pretty significant recession period. We were having cuts. I was saying, you took on 64 roads, are we going to have a proportional increase in highway and administration? The answer was no. So then the manager brought it to the council for discussion. And the discussion basically resulted in the creation of another town council roads committee that I believe met from about 2004 or 2005 to about 2012 or 13, somewhere in there, and helped work with us through this. So I bring this up as another category. Once our residents invest, should we revisit the way that we did it prior to us ceasing that approach to this one? And I'll get back to that in a minute. And then we have other remaining private roads in the community that don't fall into it. They're not going to be sewered. They're not primary collectors. And they haven't participated in the temporary repair to private roads. But they're still private roads that our residents live on. So should we include those as well? This took 50 years to put us in this discussion. If we can solve this in half that, I really think we're accomplishing something, because I've been here 34 years and we're still pretty much talking about it. So I think it's really important that we understand the long-term nature of what we're beginning to embark on here. But about half the roads, half the properties at least in town, when we're done with the CWMP, are going to have a sewer and a new coat of pavement. So we've got a real opportunity there to think about this under that one program. Back to the wastewater. So I've been coming before town council with legal and DPW asking for these batches of roadways that are private to grant us easements so that we can be eligible for state revolving funds. And we're going to continue to do that. But part of that discussion, both back in 2022 and then before that, as we told the council we were going to have to do this as part of the state, to be eligible for state revolving fund for sewer, is further direction as to whether you want us also to begin to look at the taking of these roadways. Now, I'll talk about the taking over and over and over again, but certainly we need to engage our public in this discussion, because there are many roadways in town that the public may not want us to take and make them public for whatever reason. They've got to be involved in this discussion with us. And certainly we can just continue to take easements if for some reason it makes sense that it wouldn't become a public road. But we need to further that discussion. And I'll come back to all of this for discussion with you in my last slide. So I promise I won't, end this without opening it up for a good dialogue. We're also awaiting further direction if we should take the last sewer project that we did, that's specifically the Stewart's Creek area off of C Street and around the west side of Stewart's Creek. We went in and did the same thing there that we're doing now, and those remained private roads. So I think we should revisit that, because there's still a useful, even though we're almost 15 years out now from, what was that, 2009, not quite, more than 10 years out. But still, those were new roads that we need to make sure the private ones are maintained properly. I think we should revisit that as well. That would be my recommendation to you. Jumping topics, go over to what I was referring to as primary and collector roads. I'm going to change how we describe that, because one of the recommendations of the Roads Committee was that we we file special legislation to allow us to use what was our sewer construction funds and expanded it to say sewer construction and private road funds. So that was filed with the state legislature. You know, it was voted affirmatively by town council, filed with the state legislature, and passed. So now we have a fund that very specifically says to us what we can use those funds for relevant to private roads. So it needs to meet a specific eligibility. There's about $20 million in those funds. There's about 44 roads that fall under that eligibility as we've determined it, but certainly we'll relook at anything, and if we find one that for some reason or not can be utilizing those funds, then okay. But right now we've got about 44 of those roads. We've got about 20 million. It's a special reserve fund specifically for sewer and for private roads that qualify. And right now in our CIP, we have 3 of those 44 that haven't been approved yet, but are eligible roads. We've gone back and revisited them. All 44 need work, but those 3 have risen to the point that we've identified them in the CIP. They're in the queue, and truly they're up for discussion. So, you know, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of repair on each of the roads. But that is there, and we will continue to evaluate those 44 roads progressively over time and try to address them in a logical manner. Again, we need to have discussion, awaiting direction as to whether the town will commence the taking of these eligible roads and how we might do it. Do we do it because of the use? Do we do it because of the investment of funds such as this and follow the investment with a taking or run it concurrent with a taking? The next, again, I've referred to this as temporary repair to private roads program. We have 23 of those since 2008, 23 of those roads. So all of this has been compiled since last year. That's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm able to sit here and talk with you now about this. So that's what we've been doing. 23 of these roads. It varied in scope what we did on these roads, quite honestly. Some of them were fairly minor, and some of them were significant reconstructions. So we would want to relook at those and make sure that whatever criteria we would use in this category to determine whether or not we would look to take them or not was appropriate. And then we would bring that forward at some point. You know, the last program stopped in 2004 for the reasons that I stated. And it would coincide with, if you look at our data sheets that we use in our CIP, one of the latter categories in there is not only the capital cost, but then the maintenance costs to maintain that capital improvement over the useful life of that asset. So we're saying right up front that if we're going to take these, we need to put the operating budget in place so that we can maintain these and take it to at least full useful life, if not beyond. And we need direction on how to proceed with that. And then finally, how do we do the rest? I think all of them should be folded into a multi-decade plan with the intention of any road that qualifies and that the residents support, we should look to make a public road if it's open to the public for use. Now, other things we've done, our planning department, working with our former town engineer, developed draft guidelines, because one of the things, and it's not for tonight's discussion, but one of the things we will need to have a discussion on is the fact that roads, when they've gone to the planning board, when they've gone through and under the subdivision control law, have specific specifications that they needed to build that road to. So if we find that they didn't do that, then what do we do if they're a private road? We really need to understand that, talk through that, make decisions relevant to it, okay? That's going to take time. This is to say, okay, they don't fall under this, but they're a gravel road, or there's something else, okay? We're looking for guidelines as to, well, what do we do with those when they're private roads? It could fall into any of those prior 4 categories that I identified, because they do, any and all categories. We need to talk more about that. That's going to take time. Again, it's taken a long time to get here. We're going to have to be very thoughtful, engage our public over time to address this. Fortunately for me, and after consultation with my Director of Public Works, I've retained the former town engineer to assist me organize this. Public Works will control this for the town. But you know how busy they are. You know the challenges that we have with staffing. I was able to have him come and join me and assist me. He brings a wealth of institutional knowledge and 40-plus years of engineering experience. So you'll see Roger Parsons in and out of here assisting me as we progress in the future on this. So it's greatly appreciated. But certainly Dan and Griffin and all their staff are going to lead this effort. Nothing we'll be doing won't be, done with them. And certainly their support, understanding, and approval. One of the things that I'm recommending is that I referred to our pavement management system earlier, which does a really good job in helping us understand the condition of our pavement and the cost associated with the right sort of capital or operating budget investments in that road to maximize the useful life. We don't have information on our private roads. We really need that. So I'm just saying to you, unless you tell me to stop, I'm going to cost this out. I'm going to get a scope. I'm going to try to come up with a viable funding method to not only help, obviously we work with Public Works on public road to keep this up to date and to expand it to private, because as we make these decisions going forward, we're going to need to know the condition of these roads, and we're going to need to know what sort of remedy is appropriate for the road. Most of them probably aren't chip sealing or crack sealing. It's probably some form of reconstruction. So what's the cost of that, in today's dollars at least, so we can begin to manage this issue over time. So all of that has been going on in discussion and action. Come to my closure here. It's a big question. Should we proceed with the taking of private roads? And if so, should we do it in all 4 categories? Should we do it in any of the 4 categories? Should we do it in none of the 4 categories? I'm available to begin and continue discussion. Mark Milne's here, Dan Santos is here, our legal department is here for various questions that may come up. But this isn't going to be, there's so many aspects to this that really what I'm looking for is, do you want me to continue with this effort? Because it has been labor intensive. It does cost us to do this. It's going to get more labor intensive and more expensive. And I need to make sure that I'm heading down a road that you want your town manager and staff to head down. If you feel as though, and I defer to Karen Nober on this, and I haven't asked her this yet, but if you feel as though, given the magnitude of what I'm asking you, you'd like to have a resolve in place to vote, because from time to time, especially when council has changed, they haven't, unless they go back and watch this, they haven't had the opportunity to know what past councils may have done or not done. If you think something formal needs to be done, okay. It's not typical, but I'm fine with that anytime you would like to do it. But tonight I'm asking, do you want me to continue with this effort? And I identify the 4 major areas that I think we would be looking at it. And then what my next step would be, if you say yes, is I'll begin to organize any and all of these so that in future workshops and then by future vote, I can bring it back to town council so that you can get the information you need to make good decisions, okay? And in the end, most of it might come down to, some of it might come down to some, policy establishment. Some of it might come down to, various legislation, local or state, that maybe need to be modified. Some of it will come down to votes for capital funds and ultimately votes for taking, and then finally votes relevant to operating budget requests. But I really do see, I try to provide that full picture because when I walked into this 2 decades ago, I don't think the town council had anybody really share that full picture with them. And I know the Public Works Commissioners knew about it because we met regularly and talked about it, but I really don't think the council had the benefit of that full picture and understanding long-term, this is what we're doing, and it's capital and operating and other legal aspects to undertake this. And so that's my question. How would you like me to proceed? And I'm here to try to answer any questions you may have.
So, seeing this, the four categories here, is this an order of what you recommend as priority, or do you have a recommendation as far as priority? I know this has been a topic of discussion since I've been president 3 years ago, and it's something that we've been talking about in regards to sewer and how it connects to that. I think that was the genesis of that, but then again, you know, the taking of the roads that have participated in our road repair program, and then we have connector roads. So all the things you've talked about, and I really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. But is there an order of recommendation that you would have, or is it kind of? Yeah, I understand it's. I understand it's dependent too on certain criteria.
In the back of my head, because of my time involved in this, I know where these roads are in their useful life. I know that our residents live on them, and I want them to be as safe and functional as they can be. So if it were an unlimited world of resources, I'd say no, there isn't a priority. Let's undertake all of this, but that isn't the case. Right. So I believe that we need to address the comprehensive wastewater management plan first. Why? Because we've got a schedule that we're going to implement, and that we've already come to you for easements, and we are going to continue to come to easements unless we're not going to use state revolving funds. And it makes sense to coincide with that process if our engineering and legal department know that ultimately we're looking to take these roads and maintain them. There's the key. Maintain them properly once the investment is made. We'll be maintaining the sewers. We'll be maintaining the water lines, or the districts will, and they do. So why wouldn't we maintain the road infrastructure? So I think that has to be first. The problem with that is the second category are primaries and collectors. These are roads that everybody uses. So I really think very, very almost immediately behind are these 44 roads that we need to begin looking at. We've got 3 of them in the queue. I think we should move on them. It would be helpful to know, do you want to take them in the end? Or do you just want to spend the money and then leave them in private? It buys us time, but ultimately you're not saying to us by a vote of taking that now they're public and we want you to maintain them for the way you do every other road that we invest in. So I think that's right behind. And then I think certainly for equity reasons, our community has invested, privately invested in maintaining roads. I think we should look at those to determine which one should be taken. And then I also think that, you know, everything else needs to be looked at. So nothing's left out, but I guess, yes, that's the order that I would like to see it happen in, and as much as we can possibly do in as short a time as possible for the reasons I've said.
Excellent. Thank you. Just wanted to get clarifying on that. And then now I want to offer it up to the rest of the council. I think Councilor Mendes had his hand up.
Thank you, President Levesque. I understand why you want to do CWMP first. It makes sense. It's probably more cost effective. But to me, primary and collectors are the most important because they are commonly used by every citizen in this town. And it's not fair for us, I'm one of them, who live on those roads to have to maintain those roads. So that's what I believe, I think is the fair way to do it. because everybody uses those roads. And like I said, it's not fair that we can't get our roads patched and we have sidewalks that are falling apart in front of our houses because we happen to live on a private road, but everybody in town uses them. So that's my 2 cents.
Council Steinhilber, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the presentation, Mark. And I can remember the Roads Committee we had in 2014 when Councilor Rapcorsetti was president of the council. And that was a helpful committee to have because there was so many issues that went into that. That went on for a long period of time, and there was great recommendations that came out of that committee. So I would suggest maybe a consideration of reestablishing a Roads Committee to kind of go through this because this is a very complex and layered thing that we need to decide here. I mean, some of this is just a policy decision because we know roads that we're going to fix and put new drainage in, and they're going to be good for 10, 20, 25 years, hopefully. So, like you said, you can buy some time with just a policy decision on some of these. But, I'd agree with Councilor Mendez, and that's similar to what came out of the Roads Committee almost 10 years ago now, but to focus on those collector roads. And we were able to do, I think, 4 or 5 roads at the time because, like you said, all the public's using those roads. They're thoroughfares, some of them. So I would be, right in line with you there. So some of this would be helpful. You kind of layer in the budget impact because all others is the expensive one, right? And that's the thing that needs to be planned out over decades. The policy decisions aren't really expensive. So that's my thought on it, but I would suggest maybe consideration of a reestablishment of the Roads Committee to kind of go through this. That could report back to the full council, even monthly as we kind of go through this process because it's going to be long and complex.
Thank you, Council Steinhilber. Anybody else to my left? Questions in regards to this item? Looking to my right. Anybody? Councilor Starr, please.
Thank you, President Levesque. And thank you. So what happens now with feeder roads and collector roads? What if they go south? Does this town come in and fix them? I'm thinking.
Well, we do, and I think you're seeing.
What's an example? I was thinking, wasn't Mary Dunn Road part of it's private and it was paved
yes.
recently?
Yes, yes, it was.
So,
so
how does that happen? I guess
we have 3 right now. Sorry, I'm sure that Councilor Schnapp or Councilor Levesque could probably recite the 3 as well as Public Works. I have it right here in my notes. Okay, hold Old Mill, School, and Asa Meggs.
You got it.
Those 3, sorry. So those 3 roads are listed right now in the CIP, though we haven't advanced those yet, for a combination of reasons, but they need to be done.
Yeah.
But when we begin to look more broadly, pretty much all 44 roads are in a deteriorated state. So what we would do if we use the pavement management system for those roads is we would prioritize them, and we would try to come back to you along the lines of what Councilor Steinhilber was saying and be able to show you capital and operating costs and when that operating cost, because the first 5 years of a new road is pretty good, but you got to be doing drainage and you got to watch surface, et cetera. You got to make sure it was done right, but it's pretty good. So we would try to give you a very practical cost aspect to this that would allow council, you or future councils, to make good decisions relevant to it. And so that's how we proceed relevant to these. To answer maybe your more specific question, if it reaches a safety level, we go out and fix it. We have $93,000 of budget to be able to go out and do immediate repairs when we find that. We also have the ability to accelerate through a supplemental request if we found, for example, that Old Mill reached a level that it was so unsafe, or we didn't want to go into another winter and not have it repaired, even though it takes a lot longer than a couple of months to get it ready. But that's certainly how we would approach it. The challenge that we have as well, that I have to say, is that when we were active in this prior to 2004, we had a full-time engineer. It was not why I hired Roger Parsons originally. That's what he did for us. and then he broadened to a general engineer, and then he became town engineer. He was retired after 40 years in consulting, so he thought he was coming here and just going to help out a little bit, and it didn't turn into that. So
It is now.
lucky for us. So so it's going to take a significant commitment to do this.
So, one
Yeah,
follow-up?
absolutely.
So I mean, I can see while we're doing the CWMP, on some level, we're more in charge of what actually goes in, you know, in terms of engineering and drainage, and we're there when it's made. We're not relying on somebody else and some other engineer signing off on it. So if we get it when it's perfect, we'll be able to keep it longer, you know. So there's an advantage to that.
And I think the way that our town engineer, and I'm not going to speak for Griffin, but I think he will view this information as extremely beneficial to him when he's going out and implementing the CWMP. To know that we're taking this and it's going to be public. To know that we need to make sure that all the drainage, the road surface, the sidewalks and curbing, Councilor Mendez brought that up, but right now on private roads, we don't, I mean, unless it's a real emergency, we don't touch sidewalks. He will plan differently depending on where you ask us to go with this.
And I can see a committee actually deciding where the sidewalk should be. I mean, we've talked about we're
I think that's
redoing
a
roads.
separate committee that you need. Walkability in any community is a tremendous asset. And so Elizabeth Jenkins and Director Santos will certainly organize staff to participate, but I think that's like a separate group, but related. I think we need to have a sidewalk and walkability plan in our community, and it's in different fragments, driven by different things at times. So.
And bicycles. So
yeah, we've tried that before. We should try it again.
well, put them all together.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We don't want bicycles on sidewalks. That's
Councilor
all.
Steinhilber, point of information.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, for the public, I just want to say, you know, state law, we're precluded from spending taxpayer funds on private roads. So we're allowed to spend funds up to a point, like if an emergency vehicle can't get down the road, just for public edification. And Mary Dunn Road, as you brought up, Councilor Starr, that was one of the roads back in 2014 that we got permission to spend public money on because of the work that we did and being able to show connecting roads. Old Strawberry Hill Road was one, High Street was one, and I think there was, and Kings Grant. So just information. And the other quick thing I want to say, the other thing we need to look at is the roads that when we bring them public, they have to come up to code. So we need to know which private roads are really not going to be able to come up to code because of the way, you know, people's properties are laid out. And so that's another dynamic to this that we need to catalog.
Absolutely. And those that were approved by planning board in a particular way but not built that way. And then we need to understand what it means legally and otherwise if we're going to contemplate a taking there. It can get really complicated and take years to work through. So,
Hence the road committee. Council Mendes, please.
Thank you, President Levesque. Councilor Starr, I can give you the perfect example. My Hyannis house, right? Half the road is public, half the road is private. The public part of the road, speed bumps because people use it as a cut through, beautiful sidewalks, well maintained. The private part, which my house is on, looks like it's in Beirut. I mean, the sidewalks, you can't walk on them. The roads constantly have potholes. The town will come and fill the potholes and do what they can, but as Councilor Steinhilber said, they're precluded from fixing them. So it's such a drastic difference. And maybe 10 years ago, they put speed bumps on the public part of the road, so that slowed the speed of the cars coming through the road. But on the private part, there isn't. So they can hit those speed bumps. As soon as they're over those speed bumps, then they're going 90 miles an hour down the road. So that's the dilemma, is that we pay taxes. People use the road as a cut-through. I mean, it's basically a main road now, a lot different than when I bought the house 30 years ago. But we don't get the juice for our buck. And like I said, you can't even walk down the sidewalk with your dog. You really can't. And we won't talk about the puddles and when we get heavy rain and all that stuff.
Thank you, Council Mendes. Anybody else on this side? Going back to the other side, Councilor Rapgrassetti, please.
It's good to see this workshop. Thank you, Councilor Steinhelber, for being a part of the Roads Committee previously, and I think you'd be a great chair for a new Roads Committee, and I agree there should be a Roads Committee, because roads are one of the biggest complaints from our constituents, and the poor condition and repair and whatnot, and it was House Bill 4336, if anybody wants to read it, back in 2014, that allows us to spend public money on these connector roads, provided they connect to public roads and they rise to a certain level. So, and the town's inventoried those. My question, Mark, is how many of the roads are involved in the CWMP that are private? Has that been determined? Did you say that amount? Or
No,
am
I
missing
haven't
that?
yet. And I can have DPW estimate that based on the plans, but I think until we have design, you won't have the specifics. But we can, yeah, no, I don't have that stat up here.
Okay.
I really wanted to hear from you if you want me to keep going with this.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy for me to say, I'm out of here, but I absolutely believe that it's long overdue, okay? And I understand why we stopped, you know, it was a budgetary thing, but quality of life is high up on the list. And I agree with Councilor Mendez. Let's look at the connector roads. It's ironic that the way we drafted that was so that we could kind of dip into the sewer fund, which now we're using the sewer fund, and let's use it for those major connector roads and get those out of the way. But I have concerns with regards to taking the ones in the neighborhoods that have been paid for by the private citizens, because some of those, you know, are in developments where the developer put down, you know, the basic minimum. And so when they're overlaid through that PRP program, they're really just overlaid and there's not much to them. So we have to be careful that we're not taking things that, you know, in 5 years are going to have to be beefed up again. And a lot of those private roads don't have drainage. They don't have sidewalks. They're, you know, just to pass and repass. So, but this is long overdue. I'm all for, you know, putting it into a committee and getting some roads identified and making it happen. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ramcorsetti. Councilor Lutke, please.
Yeah, Mark, absolutely. I'd like you to keep going. And similar to what Councilor Mendez said, and in my precinct, much of it is never going to be on the CWMP. And many of the roads are, as you described, just falling apart, and probably what you talked about, built very poorly. A couple of questions. This TRPRP, that's when the citizens contribute the money?
Yes.
But then you said, is this also the case that you said you don't repair that to the same standards you would repair when you take the road? You said maybe sidewalks aren't looked at?
I'll give you a very, well, no, sidewalks are not looked at.
But they are when you take a road?
If we take the road, then we would be looking at, if we take a road with a sidewalk that's in disrepair, then we would be looking to repair those. If the neighborhood talked with us about repairing the sidewalk as part of the temporary repair to private roads program, I believe we probably could do that as well. But typically, given the cost, they're really looking just to get their pavement surface and functional drainage. But yeah, certainly we could probably look at the whole thing. We're also, I believe, and Charlie McLaughlin spent a lot of time with us in this committee, I remember, and he and I had a lot of conversations when I was Director of Public Works about this. But the word temporary, and it isn't the type of construction for a 30 to 50 year reconstructed roadway. It's really based more on a, and we tell people this, but, and they're still willing to participate, which is wonderful, because their road's better. But yes, it is it is more putting asphalt and, solving a drainage problem to make it safe and functional. So yeah, it is different.
Yeah,
The way we
no-
would approach it is different because that's what the law requires us to do. This isn't supposed to be what we do on public roads. This is supposed to be temporary, even though they're paying for it.
Right, and would your pavement management system, does that mean you're going to, because you haven't mentioned in your discussion of priorities, which I agree with, I think it looks smart, but there's been no condition in there. Is that going to determine condition?
The pavement management system goes in and looks at the roads and helps us determine the condition of the pavement, therefore the appropriate approach to maintaining it, whether it's an operating budget expense like chip sealing or crack sealing, whether it's micro surfacing, whether it's grinding and paving, whether it's reconstruction. It helps us to do that. And we do it when we understand the condition of the road by where the road is in the useful life. And if Director Santos or our town engineer, Bowden, came up here and showed you the graph, how much more, if we do it right in the beginning, we save millions.
Correct.
If you let it go and it goes off, it costs millions. Most of these roads have gone off. So we're going to be in a real challenged position moving forward. We still need to know it. And to go back to what Councilor Rapcorsetti said, I really think on these roads that have participated in the temporary repair to private roads, because some of them are just drainage, we really need to run them through and understand where they are. Because if we just take them because they participated versus participated and got a new 15-year, 20-year life, those are very different. So we need to understand that. I think the Roads Committee is a great idea. It worked before. I've seen it work a couple of times. And I think it's almost essential for you to do that. So
Can you explain how that Roads Committee interacts with your efforts? How do you work together?
we meet regularly, and
What staff was involved in that?
DPW, legal, finance, and any other that they may call in. If we're going to go sidewalks and other appurtenance to public roads, private roads that become public, planning, I would say. And right now, I mean, we're working with planning on some of these issues anyways. So any and all are there. And typically, my recommendation, the most effective committees I've seen when it's going to be brought back to you, and this will be brought back to you for takings and for capital and for operating, are town council committees. Now, you may also want to create subgroups with the citizens. That's critical too. But a functional subcommittee of town council to work with staff as needed. You have all the town staff under your town manager available for this. The regular participants are your engineering division and legal. They're at the table for every discussion. Beyond that, Mark Millen, like I said, Mark Millen gets called in, planning gets called in, others, but those are the two key. And then our office, Andy or I, when you need us.
Well, I'm all for. I'm in support of this. I always like planning for things. Assessing what the budget is. I think this is a terrific effort, so I would be all in because it's a huge, in my precinct at least, I can't speak for, I drive on the roads, I see bad ones, but I have some just atrocious roads, just falling apart, totally falling apart. So this would be terrific.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lutke. Council Cusack, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would add my voice of concurrence with the idea of proceeding and the way that this committee is sort of being hashed out as conversationally here tonight. Sounds like it is a smart idea. This might be an inappropriate place, but I'm just going to sort of add this to the conversation. You've mentioned functional drainage a few times, and I don't know, just from my short period of time of dealing with some constituent services issues in my village, it just does seem that there's more power in our storms. And so I don't know if we're also going to be considering eventually like expanding what functional drainage is, whether or not the standards within the industry itself are changing because of, you know, I feel like there was a day in August where we effectively got 10% of our yearly rainfall within an hour or something. And so I don't know if that's concurrent with this conversation, but I just want to sort of plug in there that I hope, and I see Griffin shaking his head, so I feel like this is a part of the conversation that you folks are on top of.
Yes, we are, but I think it's a very important comment because, you know, and we've already started talking about walkability, but certainly beyond just the standard drains in the road, we need to be looking at the impact of drainage on our water resources. We need to be looking at coastal resiliency and what we are looking at over the next 50 years and more. We are doing that. When we add private property, private roads to this mix, in any of those categories, it's being looked at very differently in Barnstable. We are not looking at that. Now think about it. We are not looking at that issue specifically on private property, private roads. When we go for grant funds, the only reason we get SRF now is because the town council approves easements on these. When we did Stewart's Creek, they didn't ask for any of this. So the environment's changing in which we can access funds. I expect it for sidewalks. I expect it for coastal resiliency issues. I expect it for drainage beyond drainage in the road. So we really need to fold all of these in, not into the private roads program, but as layers that get considered as reasons why we can better maintain public property. Okay? We can try to help private, but it's very difficult to do it the same way that we can do it on public.
Thank you, Councilor Cusack. Councilor Jeanette, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mark. Again, an excellent presentation. I think it's an obvious that we would continue with the CWMP and making those roads public after we've put that significant investment. And obviously, I think it's very important for us to be considering the connector roads. And I think that sometimes the way we fund our capital projects, you know, even if something's identified as a priority, we have multiple priorities. And so if we, as a council, could raise the bar, and whether that's through the road committee or communication with you, to make sure that some of these projects get out of the capital planning process, which, you know, is very scientific. I mean, it's a great process, but I think some priorities sometimes get overlooked. And I think we're at a point now that we really need to raise those up.
I think your sharing this information gives me clarity. I become the gatekeeper for that on behalf of the town, though the Public Works Department and Finance Department organize the ranking of our CIP. But certainly it falls to me. Your message is clear. We'll make sure that we're bringing these in a manner that it reflects what you're asking of the town manager. Okay?
Thank you, Councilor. So obviously this has been sorry, Councilor Clark.
Sorry to come in on this late. Thank you very much. It looks like a great plan, very forward-thinking approach to the future of our town. And I'm glad that the Comprehensive Finance Committee keeps making this recommendation, so I'm glad that you're responding to the work that that citizen group does. So if this is going to grow to be a new reoccurring expense, do we have programs that might provide savings to offset that?
Programs.
Offset this new expense. So will there be savings? Like, obviously, when you evaluate the capital improvement plan, some things, when you shift your priorities, there will be losers in that game.
We have limited resources, so I think that I think we've got a lot of discussion Once we understand the conditions of these roadways and the types of improvements, if they're public, that we would recommend, and how we might use the temporary repair to private road program as an incentive, maybe, to infuse those private dollars, with the carrot at the end being it becomes public and then we maintain it, both capital and operating. I think we need to have those discussions. I don't see immediate programmatic savings at this point. I think with every private property, private road that we add, there will be over time additional expense. I don't see the savings. I think that the benefits, perhaps they quantify into dollars, but I mean, better protection of our aquifer, better preservation of property values in town because of the conditions of the roadways in our community, better management of infrastructure, better walkability, et cetera. All those things translate to more value in our community. But to try to quantify it in the way we do it in an operating budget, I don't know that you're going to see immediate savings as a result of this. I also think that there's a tremendous deferred liability here. And, in fairness to our residents, they all pay the same taxes whether they live on a public or a private road. And this is what I've heard for the better part of 34 years. And, they want to see us out there helping them out when it's open to the public. And they really don't understand why we don't do that. And to try to explain that some legislative body 30 years ago didn't take it as a public road, and they're like, what are you talking about? They don't, that just doesn't register as a valid explanation.
If I may, do other towns have that same kind of split?
I'd have to look across the Commonwealth. I think that various parts of the Commonwealth do. I think many of them deal with it differently. We did that research historically, so I'd have to go back and revisit it. But I do think that Cape Cod has a lot of private roads for whatever reason.
So when a new development pavement gets laid, is there an inspection to make sure it is up to code?
So if you built a road today
Yeah.
and it's been approved, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. There are standards that you have to meet, and I can forward them to everybody. You can take a look at them.
So that would be a candidate, a new road?
Well, that's another category. It falls under all roads, but if we have a new road built now that's built to those standards, should it come before the town council for approval as a public road?
If it's
That's another category.
understood. Thank you.
I mean, a subcategory to all others. Yeah.
It's definitely in some ways Pandora's box, in a lot of ways that we're opening up, but at the same time, we can quantify it. Looking at the CWMP, a lot of those roads are going to be paid for through our assessments. And so I would be, and then the special legislation, those are the types of things that are the CIP. Maybe we ramp those things up. And again, having a roads committee and having input not only from our councils, but from our public, and again, making it a very public process would allow, I see that's where really the serious investment will begin if we prioritize it in this order. And I think it's something we can maybe do in parallel in regards to CWMP. And then taking the roads that have already been repaired, that starts with an evaluation process to find out which ones are takeable. And again, to Council Rapcossetti's point, these have been done at different times and in different ways, and some of them aren't as good as some of the others. And that's, again, going to have to take a different type of evaluation, which I'm thrilled that Roger is part of the team. I've had an opportunity to have a couple of conversations with him. Again, the institutional knowledge that he offers, and really this being his baby in a lot of ways, I think is beneficial to all of us, and having him able to do that is a gift. So with all that, and from what I'm hearing, I think we're moving forward. And I would be in favor of once it gets to this point of, getting some quantitative recommendations, what these things might cost initially, moving forward, and then getting to that sweet spot where we form that committee and continue to move forward in that direction. So does that make sense, or any counselor disagree with that at this point, or does that sound like a plan? I think that's what I'm picking up. So is that clear to you, Town Manager Ellis?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I will. It's another bold yes.
Excellent.
That I will proceed, but I will proceed only to the appropriate point, and then be back before you to have these discussions again.
And from a personal point of view, I thank you, because this has been a topic of conversation. It's been a great education for somebody who became president, doesn't really have I don't play a DPW director on television, and I'm not an engineer. So being able to get that education and working through these things and what it would look like, I appreciate that, and that understanding going into this conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you all.
That would be the end of that workshop, but yet we have another workshop, and that is on the 0% interest loans through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Flow Neutral Workshop, and that would be Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development, and also Director of Public Works, Daniel Santos. Welcome.
Thank you, President Levesque. Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development, to have a focused discussion this evening on what it takes to get 0% interest on the loans that we use to finance wastewater projects in the town of Barnstable through the Massachusetts State Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, an initiative that we frequently refer to as flow neutral, and that I'll introduce really and very broadly as an expectation that the town correlate our land use planning with our wastewater planning to ensure that when sewers are installed in our community, we continue to meet expectations and needs regarding both resource protection and growth management. All right. So amendments to the Federal Clean Water Act in 1987 created the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program, which was intended to finance water quality projects and help states and their municipalities comply with federal and state water quality requirements. And this assistance comes in the form of the provision of below market rate financing for these qualifying sewer infrastructure projects. And functionally every summer, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection solicits projects from Massachusetts municipalities and other qualifying entities for consideration for subsidized state revolving fund loans. These projects that are submitted are evaluated based on their readiness to proceed and a priority rating. And the Mass DEP assigns projects to a fundable project list that we generally refer to as the intended use plan project listing, or the IUP. On an annual basis, Massachusetts provides $903 million, or at least that was the number last year, to finance clean water projects. And this program is administered by Mass DEP and the Mass Clean Water Trust. Currently, the standard subsidy for qualifying projects under the trust is 2% interest, 20-year loan. But there are opportunities for certain projects to receive 30-year loans and or lower interest rates. Again, the major goal of this program is to be providing an incentive to communities to undertake projects that have water quality and public health benefits, again, meeting the needs of our communities and our watersheds. So Barnstable has currently financed $43.6 million worth of projects through the SRF and on the 2020 through 2022 IUP. Our current base subsidy is 1.5%, so below the standard 2. And that's a result of the fact that the town of Barnstable is a community with a housing choice designation. So this, again, is a reflection of our town's commitment to meeting best practices that were set by the state administration in terms of meeting the housing needs of our community. So again, that housing choice designation has the effect of the additional half percentage point there for projects on our IUP. So currently on the 2023 IUP, we have 4 projects that are being submitted. So in 2023 alone, we have $41 million of pending projects on the IUP. You'll see the 4 that are there. Again, largely projects that implement our comprehensive wastewater management plan. And so right now we're at 1.5%. The state issued guidance several years ago on how to obtain 0% rate of interest for projects. Again, for projects mitigating public health, providing an environment to, providing a benefit to the environment, and that demonstrate what they call a comprehensive planning and alternative analysis. So there are 5 criteria that Mass DEP lays out for meeting 0% interest. The first is that it has to be a water quality project. It's intended to remediate nutrient enrichment in your water supply. So that, that's the fundamental goal of our comprehensive water management plan. So check on that one. That the town is not currently subject to any enforcement orders or any other violations of TMDLs. So check on number 2, that we have an approved comprehensive wastewater management plan by DEP. So check on number 3, and that specific projects have been deemed consistent with our regional water resources plan. In this case, the Cape Cod Commission 208 plan. We run those determinations through the Cape Cod Commission for those consistencies, and again, check have continued to show compliance and progress towards meeting the goals of our 208 plan, which brings us to number 5, which is land use controls. So number 5 reads, the adoption of land use controls and subject to the review of, in this case, the approval by Mass DEP, subject to review by Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, formerly DHCD, and the Cape Cod Commission. Again, land use controls intended to limit wastewater flows to the amount authorized under the land use controls that were in effect on the date our comprehensive wastewater management plan was approved. And I'll explain what that means functionally a little bit more. But first, why pursue this? Obviously, a significant cost savings given the scale of our borrowing. You can see as we ramp up implementation of our CWMP, $41 million alone in fiscal year, in our current fiscal year, and as we get into 2025, increasing significantly. The finance director provided this analysis on both a 20-year loan and a 30-year loan for every $10 million borrowed and financed under the SRF. If we had 0%, we would realize savings between $1.6 million and $3.2 million, again, for every $10 million borrowed, depending on whether it's a 20 or 30-year loan. So again, coming back to the requirements to demonstrate flow neutrality, the expectation is a local ordinance or a regulation. Most communities we see using general ordinances. And again, a town must demonstrate that sewers will not enable more growth than otherwise would have been allowed under the land use regulations at the time your CWMP was approved. And so there are essentially two ways that the Code of Massachusetts regulations laid out for how this can be achieved. Essentially, they want you to do a build out, again, in the regulation, based on the regulations that were in place when your CWMP was approved. Then they want you to do a build out that's based on the land use regulations that are in effect at the time at the time of construction of a project for which the 0% rate of interest is being sought is expected to be complete. So a pre-sewer build-out and a post-sewer build-out. Again, showing that your pre-sewer build-out will not, your post-sewer build-out will not exceed your pre-sewer build-out. What I do want to emphasize here is that, what this is saying is it doesn't say no growth. It takes into account the fact that when communities put CWMPs together, we anticipate growth, we anticipate build out. But again, that not wanting to see unanticipated or unexpected growth based on the provision of sewers. What the second way of calculating build-out gives you is the flexibility to allocate those flows for new growth and expansion of existing development. Again, saying that towns should coordinate their land use planning with their wastewater planning to ensure that resource protection and growth management needs are met. So the good news is our comprehensive wastewater management plan follows many of the steps that are necessary to conduct these build-outs in a consistent methodology that is expected under the flow neutral regulations. So our CWMP calculated existing wastewater generation. I'm sorry, I don't know why I have trouble with this. Yeah. Thank you. As well as build out, actually in a couple of different ways. There's the MEP watershed build outs, and then there was a build out that was done by Department of Public Works in conjunction with planning that looked at ultimate build out in our watersheds, both based on potential commercial and residential build-out projections. These were based on zoning, the zoning that was in place at the time, based on other development constraints, like, for example, did a wetland affect the developability of a property, a number of factors, and from that extrapolated additional wastewater flow and turned those into, turned that ultimate build-out number into realistic projections. So we do have all of those numbers in our CWMP, again, calculated based on the land use regulations that were in place at the time. I will note that, we have been looking at the success of a number of other communities in pursuing flow neutral. Barnstable, much like the private roads discussion, is of course much larger and much more complex, and implementation of our CWMP is really a completely different animal than we see certainly in other Cape communities. We have 4 different watersheds right here that are, that have TMDLs. We have multiple different sewer service areas. So really taking an example of what we see in a community and trying to translate that over to the town of Barnstable is a little bit more complex. Frankly, just because of the size and scope of our town and our CWMP efforts. I will also note that we have changed zoning a number of times since we did those initial build-out projections in our CWMP. We have a housing crisis in the town of Barnstable, and the town has been committed to using zoning as a tool to respond to that. So these are a few of the zoning changes that we've made, largely impacting that Lewis Bay watershed, that have increased development potential under the zoning that was in place at the time we did our comprehensive wastewater management plan. Again, perhaps with the exception of accessory dwelling units, these are areas that were already sewered, that we did anticipate build out in and that we're not doing projects that we really are specifically focused on water quality and nitrogen remediation. Those are the projects that we see in our other watersheds, in our Centerville watershed, in our Three Bays watershed. But do need to point out that there has been changes in our land use landscape. So I don't have a recommendation or solution tonight. We are seeking additional guidance on how these regulations apply to the town of Barnstable, especially given the fact that our CWMP is applicable town-wide, that we do have multiple watersheds and multiple sewer service areas. But again, I do think it's important to set an expectation that in order to achieve this 0% financing, there is an expectation that there needs to be an ordinance or a regulation put in place or adopted that essentially limits or reallocates growth expected under our CWMP to achieve that 0% interest. So that concludes my overview, and I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Jenkins, looking to my left, are there any questions, discussion? Council Clark, please.
Thank you very much, President Levesque, and thank you very much, Director Jenkins, for this presentation. So what would be the next step? How are you?
So we're seeking subject matter expertise. I've been in communication with the Cape Cod Commission, who's worked with a number of towns on this, as well as a consulting firm who helps the town of Orleans achieve 0% interest through a build-out analysis, again, in the town of Orleans. And really thinking about, let's put together a good case. Again, I think we have an excellent build out in our CWMP. Let's get their guidance on the expectations that they have from Mass DEP. And from that, we can backfill any additional build out analysis that we need, and then hopefully approach DEP with a proposal that I think hopefully shows that our build out and the projections that we put in place, especially when you look at that aggregate build out, when you take into account both the commercial and the residential build out that we expected, we've certainly, I certainly think that if we look at that aggregate build out, we're probably going to end up with an expectation that we're going to see a little bit more residential build out than we expected, and probably not the rate of commercial build out that we expected. So we're going to take a close look at how those allocations happened, and hopefully, even with the zoning changes in place, see if the numbers continue to support flow neutrality.
Good, that means the savings can go towards roads.
Good point. Anybody else on this side? Questions for Director Jenkins? Okay, looking to my right. Anybody? Oh, Councilor Rapcasetti, please.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for this. I think it behooves us to, and it was mentioned earlier, to sit down with Board of Health. Because when you see Board of Health's agenda and there's bedroom determinations on their agenda with properties that fall within the saltwater estuary zone, which is a good portion of our town.
Yeah. And it's a land use regulation,
And
a land
it's a
use
land
control,
use regulation.
certainly.
So, and DEP looking at us, and if we're allowing these increase of bedrooms, which are limited to 3 bedrooms in that zone, if we're going to bump it up to 4 and keep entertaining those, I think that's a pause for concern. So whatever we can do to get us to 0, I'm all for that.
All right.
But at the same time, we should be talking the same talk, the town. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I would agree. Left hand needs to know what the right hand's doing in regards to what we're moving forward with, for sure. Anybody else? Councilor Starr. Actually, Councilor Starr has a lot to. I know this is something that was a priority of Councilor Starr. It was definitely something we needed to get on the agenda. And I said I would definitely get on the agenda by September. So here we are.
Still September. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. It sounds hopeful. I think there's enough. Seems like there's enough capacity in the CWMP, and we everybody planned ahead you know, what build out would look like.
Yep.
And I've got the regulations from Falmouth and Chatham also have flow neutral regulations. I think it's something we can do.
Yeah, I mean, Falmouth and Chatham were very straightforward, very small sewer service areas
Yep.
in comparison to the town of Barnstable and our 60 square miles. And they essentially achieved it by saying, you know, communities can add one bedroom in addition to what individual homeowners' existing development can add one bedroom to what they have over Title V. And then there were commercial allocations. Again, I think our scenario is a little bit different because of our size and scope. I think we look at our build out in the aggregate and we think about flexibility on how to allocate those building numbers to be able to support the housing that we need. When realistically, we are probably, it's not going to be distributed perhaps in the straightforward way that we thought watershed by watershed, but do have that capacity in the overall number.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you for looking at it broadly like that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think it's important too that, you know, we're looking at the 0% interest rate. There is a clock ticking in regards to what projects and when this could actually come into place. If you wouldn't mind, if I could get Finance Director Mark Milne, I kind of know the answer to the question, but just for the sake of this, the rest of the council, what are we talking timeline-wise for our next group of projects that if we move forward with this in a timely fashion, we could be seeing this cost savings?
So the trust is, good evening, first of all, Councilor Mark Milne, Director of
Thank you.
Finance. The trust is going out to finance $41 million of Barnstable projects in a couple of weeks. We're not going to qualify, obviously, for that round of funding. But the good news there is we got $16 million in subsidies on that $41 million, so about $30 million will be borrowed. But I'd say a year from now, if we want to have a land use policy in place, I think a year from now, because they'll do their next round of financing, probably in October or November of 2024. So if we got about a year before we do our next significant round of financing, which will be Centerville Village Sewer expansion in Route 28 East or West.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And so in 2023, the IUP is $41 million. And you said the trust is going to pick up some of that, or we're hoping?
Actually, the projects that are getting financed with this in a couple of weeks are the projects that were listed on the 2020 and 2021 IUPs.
Oh.
So our projects that are on the 2022 and 2023 IUPs won't get financed until next year.
Okay.
At the earliest.
Okay.
Could be even a little later.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to the future, right? Councilor Snap.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Elizabeth. A complicated concept to explain, and I think you really, hit all the major points. Could you talk a little bit how trying to achieve this 0% and the timing of figuring that out will coincide with the next phase of our local comprehensive plan?
Absolutely, which is what I wanted to make sure that we closed on, because we are about to reconvene our local comprehensive planning committee in October, and we have our October meeting set to have our Department of Public Works come in, review our CWMP with our local comprehensive planning committee, as well as a lot of the issues we just talked about relevant to water supply, really to set the tone for the next 3 months of their work, which will be to think about the intersection of infrastructure, housing need, and future land use mapping in the town of Barnstable. So, I mean, in my opinion, was the driving force behind updating our local comprehensive plan, is to make sure that, we are thinking about the expansion of sewers in our community and making sure we do have land use policy in place that's not going to produce unanticipated growth. I mean, that is a, that is probably one of the most detrimental things that can happen to a community's character, which we see number one is the thing that people most value here in the town of Barnstable. So I think it's incredibly prudent that we're doing this and that this is coming together now as part of our CWMP and our local comprehensive planning efforts.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Thank you, Councilor Schnapp. Councilor Lutke, please.
Yeah, I just had one question. Again, a fantastic presentation. I had understood that at the build-out of the current CWMP, we would then look for a new area to release the effluent. Is that part of this at all in terms of this planning or not?
Yeah, no, the effluent discharge questions, which again, I completely defer to Director Santos, but that is not, again, part of the criteria and what they're looking at here. Again, this is more of a policy question, and again, are you planning for that future growth? And again, are you being prudent to make sure that the installation of sewers is not going to have an undue impact on growth or community character?
Okay. Looking to my right. Anybody else? Left? I would say, again, look, I know you're looking for direction there. I would say that there's a support for moving forward with, some sort of policy moving forward, what would benefit. And again, we're obviously very unique compared to other towns where we have 7 villages, and this dovetails really well with our roads and LCPC and our CWMP and all the conversations that we're having in regards to that. I believe it was Councilor Steinhill who told me that we are the 4th largest road system in the state of Massachusetts. So there's a lot happening, and obviously we have character of 7 villages, which gets brought up a lot, and obviously something we take seriously. And so very complicated, but please, move forward with the resources that you can come up with. And again, thank you, Finance Director Milne, for your input in regards to this, and your Director Santos for your input in putting this together as well. So great presentation, and I'm hoping you have the direction that you need from us to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again to staff, Town Manager Els, very robust discussion. Thank you, councilors, for your discussion. I think we got a lot accomplished, and tonight with those workshops, great questions, and also thank you for your patience of getting these things on the agenda. I know there was a lot of requests in regards to these discussions, so we will continue to move forward. Moving on to our orders of business, our first item of old business, Councilor Starr, please, if you could. Item number 2024-036.
Thank you, President Levesque. This is indeed old business, the only old business we have. Public hearing decided by a roll call majority vote. This is number 2024-036. Order waiving inspection fees for public libraries in the town of Barnstable for a period of 1 year.
Second.
First and second, and we have Town Attorney Karen Nober here for the rationale. We also have Building Commissioner Brian Florence here to answer any questions as well. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, councilors. Karen Nober, Town Attorney. This item is to waive inspection fees for public libraries in the town of Barnstable for a period of 1 year. Several councilors have asked that we waive those inspection fees. I believe that's because all residents of the town of Barnstable benefit from the services provided by the town's public libraries. We have in the past waived these fees. In 2016, we waived them for the Hyannis Fire District, and in 2022, we waived fees both times for construction work, in that case by the Barnstable Fire District. This vote would be an interim measure to give the Director of Inspectional Services time to come back to the council with a more comprehensive proposal for the waiver of fees. So that's why it's structured as just 1 year. So I'd be happy to take questions, or Director Florence might be happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the rationale. And any questions to my left in regards to this item? Yes, thank you. Appreciate that. It is a public hearing. Is anybody in the room like to speak on this item? Not seeing anybody like to participate remotely?
There is no one for this item.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Councilor Shaughnessy. And anybody have any questions in regards to this item looking to my left? Or points of discussion? Looking to my right, anybody? Okay, seems pretty cut and dry. So this is a roll call majority vote, please. If we can move to that vote.
Councilors Clark,
Yes.
Cullum,
Yes.
Cusack,
Yes.
Rapcorsetti.
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Neary. Yes. Schnapp,
Yes.
Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Steinhilber.
Yes.
12 yes, thank you.
Thank you. First item of new business, Councilor Schnepp, please. Item number 2024-037.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an item of new business, a first reading, referred to a second reading on October 5th, 2023. Item number 2024-037, appointments to a board, committee, or commission. The Town Council appoints the following individuals to a multiple-member board, committee, or commission. Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee, James Sproul as a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2026. Housing Committee, Asia Graves as a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2026. Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Appeals Committee, Aaron Webb as a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2024. And Open Space Committee, Lev Malakoff as a regular member to a term expiring 6/30/2024.
And a first and a second, again, referring to a public hearing. If you can, councilors, if you could signify your approval by moving this forward, by raising your hand and saying aye. That is unanimous. Thank you, Councilor Schnepp. Next item of new business, Madam Vice Chair, if you could please, item number 2024-038.
Yes, I'd like to refer to a public hearing on 10/5/2023, item 2024-038, supplemental appropriation order in the amount of $52,993 for the Barnstable School Department fiscal year 2024 operating budget for the purpose of funding a full-time administrative assistant position for special education finances and Medicaid as written.
Second.
We have a first and a second, again, referring to a public hearing. If you could signify your approval, council, by raising your hand and saying aye. Moved. The item is moved, and that is unanimous. And I believe that is the end of our items of new business. I would
Move to adjourn.
move to adjourn. Move to adjourn. Second. All councilors signify your approval by raising your hand and saying aye, please.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.